4 masked men, 1 mop. 30 seconds that would expose a ghost. When biotech CEO Dr. Evelyn Carter was attacked in a parking garage at midnight, the last person she expected to save her was the quiet night janitor. But Daniel Reyes moved like a weapon, precise, lethal, impossibly trained. By morning, she'd discover the man mopping her floors was supposed to be dead, and the cure her company was developing? It was the only thing keeping his dying son alive. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights of Biogenesis Technologies hummed their sterile lullaby as Dr. Evelyn Carter pushed through the executive suite doors at 11:43 p.m., her heels clicking against marble that cost more per square foot than most people earned in a month. 16 hours. 16 brutal, unforgiving hours of FDA preparation, investor calls, and the kind of pressure that turned brilliant scientists into hollow-eyed ghosts haunting their own ambitions. Her reflection in the darkened glass walls showed a woman she barely recognized. Designer suit wrinkled, dark hair escaping its professional twist, mascara smudged beneath eyes that had forgotten what 8 hours of sleep felt like. At 38, Evelyn had built an empire from brilliant innovation and ruthless determination. Biogenesis wasn't just another pharmaceutical company, it was her legacy, her purpose. Her entire existence poured into petri dishes and clinical trials. The pediatric oncology drug they developed, compound K17, represented 7 years of research, $200 million in development costs, and the potential to save 15,000 children annually from aggressive neuroblastoma. Tomorrow's FDA hearing would determine whether those children lived or became statistics. No pressure, she thought bitterly, jabbing the elevator button with more force than necessary. The executive elevator descended through the building's 12 floors with mechanical indifference to her exhaustion. Evelyn leaned against the cool metal wall, closing her eyes as fragments of the day replayed behind her eyelids. Dr. Morrison's concerns about the stability data. The board's thinly veiled threats about stock prices. The parents who'd sent letters, photos of children with bright eyes and bald heads begging for hope. Please, Dr. Carter. Our daughter Emma just turned 6. She loves butterflies and wants to be an astronaut. She doesn't have much time left. Evelyn's hand trembled as she rubbed her temples. She'd memorized every face, every name. That was her curse. She couldn't separate the science from the souls depending on it. Some CEOs viewed patients as data points, success metrics for quarterly reports. Evelyn saw them as the reason she'd abandoned a comfortable research position at Johns Hopkins to gamble everything on a startup that nearly bankrupted her twice before finding its footing. The elevator chimed. Level B2, executive parking. The doors slid open to reveal the underground garage, a vast concrete cathedral of shadows and sleeping vehicles. Most of the spaces sat empty at this hour. Only her silver Mercedes, Dr. Morrison's Lexus 3 spots over, and the scattered cars of night shift security remained. Evelyn stepped out, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The parking garage always felt different at night, larger somehow, as if the darkness expanded the walls beyond their daytime dimensions. Industrial lights cast pools of sickly yellow illumination every 20 feet, leaving gaps of shadow thick enough to hide secrets. She'd made this walk 1,000 times. Her reserved spot was 60 feet from the elevator, clearly marked with a brass placard that read, Dr. E. Carter, CEO. Security cameras monitored every angle. The building employed former military personnel as night guards. She was safe here, safer than on most city streets at midnight. So why did the hair on the back of her neck suddenly stand up? Evelyn's pace quickened involuntarily, her lizard brain detecting something her conscious mind hadn't yet processed. Her hand dove into her purse, fingers closing around the canister of pepper spray her sister had insisted she carry. The Mercedes key fob felt slippery in her other palm, though she couldn't remember her hand starting to sweat. 30 feet from her car. 25. That's when she heard it. The scuff of a shoe against concrete, deliberate enough to be intentional. A warning. A threat? Her head snapped to the left toward the sound. Nothing. Just shadows between 2 massive concrete support pillars. Hello? Her voice sounded smaller than she'd intended, swallowed by the garage's oppressive acoustics. Security? Silence answered. But it was the wrong kind of silence. Not empty, but full. Waiting. Evelyn's corporate training kicked in. Don't run. Don't show fear. Project confidence. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and continued walking toward her vehicle with measured steps that belied her hammering heart. 15 feet. 10. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously. They emerged from behind the pillars like smoke gaining form, 4 figures in dark clothing, faces obscured by black ski masks. No hesitation, no demands for valuables. This wasn't a mugging. The coordinated precision spoke of planning, training, purpose. One moved to cut off her retreat to the elevator. 2 flanked her sides. The 4th came straight at her from the front. Evelyn's keys fell from her nerveless fingers, clattering against the concrete with a sound like gunshots in a cathedral. The pepper spray can followed, rolling uselessly away into shadow. Her mind, usually so sharp and analytical, fragmented into pure animal panic. "Help!" The scream tore from her throat, desperate and raw. "Help me!" But who would hear? The executive floor was 12 stories up. Security made their rounds every 30 minutes. Dr. Morrison had left an hour ago. She was alone with predators, and they knew it. The lead attacker's hand shot out, fingers reaching for her throat. Evelyn stumbled backward, her heel catching on nothing, sending her sprawling. Pain exploded through her hip as she hit the concrete. The fluorescent lights above spun sickeningly. This was it. This was how Evelyn Carter's brilliant career ended, murdered in her own parking garage. Compound K-17 dying with her. Those 15,000 children becoming 15,000 funerals. Then the shadows moved. Not the attackers, something else. Something that had been there all along, invisible in the periphery where corporate executives never bothered to look. A cleaning cart rolled into the pool of light with a squeak of worn wheels, pushed by a figure in a gray janitor's uniform. For a surreal moment, time seemed to pause. The attackers froze. Evelyn, sprawled on the cold concrete, looked up at the most unlikely savior imaginable. Daniel Reyes was unremarkable in the way that made people invisible. Average height, lean build, maybe 35 years old with dark hair and the kind of quiet face that never drew second glances. He wore the same gray uniform as every other member of the night cleaning crew. Biogenesis logo embroidered on the chest, name tag slightly crooked, yellow rubber gloves stuffed in his back pocket. His cart carried the standard equipment: industrial mop, bucket, bottles of cleaning solution, trash bags. Nothing about him suggested danger or capability. He was furniture, background noise, the help, which made what happened next all the more impossible. The lead attacker turned toward Daniel, dismissing him with a gesture. "Get lost, janitor. This doesn't concern—" The mop handle moved. That was all Evelyn would remember clearly later. The way the wooden handle slid from its holder on the cart into Daniel's grip with a fluid motion that spoke of muscle memory older than conscious thought. Not grabbed, not seized. It simply arrived in his hands like it had always belonged there. The first attacker never finished his sentence. Daniel's movement was economical, almost lazy. A single horizontal strike that caught the man across the temple with the mop's wooden shaft. The crack of impact echoed through the garage like a breaking branch. The attacker's head snapped sideways, his body following the momentum. He crumpled, unconscious before he hit the ground. 1 second, one motion, one opponent eliminated. The other 3 attackers reacted with the training of professionals. They spread out, flanking positions, hands moving inside their jackets. But Daniel was already moving. He spun the mop like a staff, the wet strings trailing water droplets that caught the fluorescent light like a constellation wheeling through space. The second attacker rushed him from the right. Daniel sidestepped, redirecting the man's momentum with the mop handle pressed against his shoulder, using his own force against him. The attacker stumbled into the cleaning cart with a metallic crash. The third came from the left, trying to grapple. Daniel reversed his grip, driving the mop handle backward like a spear into the man's solar plexus. Air exploded from the attacker's lungs with a whoosh. He doubled over, and Daniel's knee came up to meet his descending face. Bone crunched. The man fell. 15 seconds since the fight began. The 4th attacker, the smart one, pulled a knife. 6 inches of serrated steel gleamed under the lights as he circled, looking for an opening. This one had training, real training. Military maybe, or mercenary. He moved on the balls of his feet, blade held low and ready, eyes tracking Daniel's center mass rather than his hands. "You made a mistake, Janitor," the man growled, his voice carrying an accent Evelyn couldn't place. Eastern European, perhaps? Or Russian? Daniel said nothing. His expression remained neutral, almost bored. He adjusted his grip on the mop handle, and for just a moment Evelyn saw something flicker across his face, a shadow of something ancient and tired. The look of a man who'd done this too many times before. The knife fighter attacked with professional efficiency, a low slash meant to gut, followed by an upward thrust toward the heart, fast, lethal. But Daniel wasn't there. He pivoted inside the knife's arc, the blade missing his ribs by inches. His left hand trapped the attacker's wrist, controlling the weapon. His right elbow came up in a short, brutal strike that connected with the man's jaw. The knife clattered to the concrete. Daniel swept the man's legs out from under him with the mop handle, then brought it down in a controlled strike that ended the fight, but didn't kill. The attacker lay still. 30 seconds total. 4 trained operatives. 1 janitor with a mop. The silence that followed felt heavier than the violence that had preceded it. Evelyn remained frozen on the ground, her analytical mind trying to process what her eyes had just witnessed. This wasn't possible. Janitors didn't move like that. People didn't fight like that. Not real people. Not outside of movies or special forces compounds or places where violence was currency. Daniel stood among the fallen attackers, breathing slightly elevated but not winded, mop still gripped in both hands. His gray uniform was unmarked except for some water stains from the mop. No blood, no torn fabric. He dismantled 4 armed professionals without breaking a sweat. Slowly, as if waking from a dream, he turned to look at Evelyn. His eyes were dark brown, warm even, the eyes of someone's father or brother, not a man who just incapacitated 4 attackers in half a minute. He lowered the mop, parking it against his cart with the practiced motion of someone returning a tool to its proper place. "Dr. Carter." His voice was soft, carrying a slight accent she'd never noticed in their brief previous encounters. "Are you hurt?" The question broke through her paralysis. Evelyn pushed herself to a sitting position, wincing as her hip protested. No, I don't think so. I just..." Words failed. What did one say? "Thank you for saving my life with janitorial supplies" seemed inadequate. Daniel approached slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. He crouched beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Up close, she noticed details she'd never seen before. A thin scar along his jawline, calluses on his palms that spoke of hard labor, eyes that carried weight behind their warmth. "We should call security," he said calmly, as if discussing a spilled coffee rather than an assassination attempt. "And the police. These men will wake up soon." "You..." Evelyn's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, tried again. "How did you do that?" Something flickered in Daniel's expression, caution, maybe, or resignation. "I got lucky, Dr. Carter. They didn't expect resistance." That wasn't luck. She met his eyes directly, her scientific mind reasserting itself despite the adrenaline still flooding her system. "That was training, serious training. Who are you?" "I'm the night janitor," Daniel replied, but even as he said it, they both knew it was only part of the truth. Before Evelyn could press further, the screech of tires announced arriving vehicles. 3 security SUVs roared into the parking garage, followed closely by a police cruiser. Someone had heard her scream after all, or perhaps the security cameras had triggered an alert. What followed was chaos of a different kind. Questions fired from all directions, statements taken, paramedics checking her for injuries despite her protests. The 4 attackers, now regaining consciousness, were cuffed and searched. No identification on any of them. Professional gear, zip ties, chloroform, industrial-grade trash bags, not mugging supplies, kidnapping equipment. Through it all, Daniel stood quietly beside his cleaning cart, answering questions with polite brevity. Yes, he'd witnessed the attack. No, he didn't know why they targeted Dr. Carter. Yes, he'd defended himself and the doctor. No, he didn't have military training, just grew up in a rough neighborhood. The lies came easily, smoothly, practiced. Evelyn watched him from where she sat in the back of an ambulance, a shock blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the parking garage's stagnant warmth. The man was a puzzle, and Evelyn had built her career on solving puzzles. But this one had layers. She could sense them beneath his calm exterior, mysteries wrapped in a janitor's uniform. Dr. Carter. Detective Sarah Matthews, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair, slid into the ambulance beside her. I need to ask you some difficult questions. Of course. Have you received any threats recently? Emails, calls, letters? Evelyn considered. Nothing direct. But tomorrow's FDA hearing has made some people unhappy. Competing pharmaceutical companies stand to lose billions if compound K17 gets approved. We've had protesters, some angry correspondents from investors in rival firms. Detective Matthews scribbled notes. Enough to warrant hiring professional kidnappers? Is that what they were? Based on their equipment and lack of identification? Almost certainly. This was a planned operation, Dr. Carter. They knew your schedule, your parking spot, the security rotation. Someone with access to your company's information set this up. A chill that had nothing to do with shock ran down Evelyn's spine. You're saying someone inside Biogenesis tried to have me kidnapped? I'm saying it's a possibility we need to investigate. The detective's expression softened slightly. But right now, you're safe. That janitor of yours probably saved your life. Where did you find him? Evelyn realized with embarrassment that she didn't know. Daniel was just part of the building's infrastructure, hired by facilities management, working nights when executives weren't around to notice. I'd have to check his employment records. Please do. We'll need his full statement tomorrow. Detective Matthews closed her notebook. In the meantime, I'm assigning a patrol car to your house tonight. These men aren't talking yet, but when they do, we'll find out who hired them. The detective left to coordinate with her team, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts. Across the garage, Daniel was finally being released by the police. He pushed his cleaning cart toward the elevator, moving with the same unhurried pace as always, as if he'd just finished mopping floors rather than dismantling an assault team. On impulse, Evelyn called out, "Mr. Reyes!" He paused, turned. Even from 20 feet away, she could see the wariness in his posture, a deer deciding whether to bolt. She stood, letting the shock blanket fall away, and crossed to him on unsteady legs. "Thank you. That seems insufficient, but thank you. Just doing my job, Dr. Carter." That same deflection, same careful distance. "Your job is cleaning floors, not—" She gestured at the crime scene tape being strung around the area. "This. Where did you learn to fight like that?" Daniel's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his eyes. A door closing, locks engaging. "I should finish my shift. The third floor needs attention." He was shutting her out, retreating behind the invisibility of his uniform. Evelyn recognized the tactic. She'd used it herself in boardrooms when investors probed too deeply into proprietary research. But this felt different. This felt like survival. "Mr. Reyes, Daniel, if you ever need anything, please ask. Biogenesis owes you a debt tonight." For a moment, she thought he might respond honestly. His jaw worked, words forming and reforming behind his lips. Then the moment passed, and the mask settled back into place. "Good night, Dr. Carter. I hope your hearing goes well tomorrow." He pushed his cart into the elevator and was gone, leaving Evelyn standing in a parking garage that smelled of cleaning solution and violence, surrounded by police trying to piece together an attack that should have succeeded. But one thought burned brighter than all the others in her exhausted mind. The man who'd just saved her life was lying about everything. And somewhere in those lies was a truth that terrified him more than 4 armed attackers. 3 hours later, Daniel Reyes let himself into a small 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from Biogenesis. The building was old but clean, filled with young families and working-class professionals who minded their own business. Perfect anonymity. He locked the door behind him, deadbolt, chain, and a door brace he'd installed himself, then stood in the dark entryway listening. Nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic. Safe. The apartment was sparse but comfortable. Second-hand furniture arranged with military precision. Kitchen spotless, dishes drying in the rack. Living room dominated by a bookshelf overflowing with medical texts and children's books existing in odd harmony. Gray's Anatomy beside Where the Wild Things Are. Surgical journals next to Captain Underpants. Daniel moved through the apartment with practiced quiet, checking each room. Bathroom clear, his bedroom empty. Then he eased open the door to the second bedroom and felt the knot in his chest loosen slightly. Noah Reyes lay curled beneath dinosaur print sheets, his small body rising and falling with the steady rhythm of sleep. At 7 years old, he was small for his age, a side effect of the medication that kept him alive. Dark hair like his father's, features that would have matched his mother's if she'd survived long enough to see him grow. Daniel crossed to the bedside and knelt, brushing hair from Noah's forehead. The boy's skin was warm but not fevered. Good. The anti-seizure medication sat on the nightstand beside a glass of water, a plastic dinosaur cup, and a digital clock showing 3:17 a.m. in glowing red numbers. Beside the lamp lay several drawings in crayon, Noah's latest masterpieces. Daniel picked one up carefully, studying it in the dim light filtering through the window. A stick figure in gray, him, standing next to a much smaller stick figure, Noah, beneath a yellow sun. At the bottom, in Noah's careful printing, "My dad is a hero." If you only knew, buddy, Daniel thought. If you only knew what your hero did tonight. Dad? The sleepy voice made Daniel startle, though he was careful not to show it. Hey, buddy. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. Daniel set the drawing down and sat on the edge of the bed. Noah rubbed his eyes, squinting in the darkness. Did you save someone today? The question hit harder than any of those attackers' strikes. Daniel forced a smile. Just cleaned up a mess. Nothing exciting. Was it a big mess? Pretty big. Noah yawned hugely, then burrowed deeper into his blankets. You're good at cleaning messes. Mrs. Chen says you work too hard. Mrs. Chen, their neighbor, watched Noah during Daniel's night shifts. A grandmother of 5 with endless patience and a tendency to leave Tupperware containers of soup outside their door. She worried about them, the single father and his sick son. But she asked no questions. Another blessing in a life short on them. Mrs. Chen worries too much, Daniel said softly. You should sleep. School tomorrow. Can we go to the park this weekend, if I feel okay? Daniel's throat tightened. Noah had good days and bad days. The medication controlled most of the seizures, but the underlying condition, a rare form of pediatric epilepsy complicated by a genetic neurological disorder, was progressive. Without the new treatment Biogenesis was developing, without compound K17, Noah had maybe 2 years. 3 if they were lucky. We'll see how you feel, Daniel said, which was the most honest answer he could give. Now sleep. Doctor's orders. Noah giggled at their running joke. You're not a doctor anymore. Once a doctor, always a doctor, now sleep. Daniel waited until Noah's breathing evened out again before standing. He pulled the blanket up higher, checked that the baby monitor on the dresser was working. Even though Noah was 7, the seizures made the monitor necessary. And finally allowed himself to leave. In his own bedroom, Daniel stripped off the gray janitor's uniform and examined himself in the mirror mounted on the closet door. No visible injuries from the fight, just some bruising that would purple by morning. His body was a map of older scars, though. Bullet wound on his left shoulder, shrapnel damage across his ribs, the surgical scar from when an IED had nearly ended his career and his life in the mountains of Afghanistan. Dr. Daniel Reyes, Major, United States Army. Trauma surgeon attached to Special Forces. 2 tours, 3 medals for valor, and a classified death certificate filed 5 years ago when everything went wrong. He'd been researching battlefield trauma treatment, developing new protocols for treating neurological damage in combat conditions. His work had been groundbreaking, so groundbreaking that it had attracted the wrong kind of attention. When he'd discovered that someone in the military-industrial complex was stealing his research to develop chemical weapons that caused the very neurological damage he was trying to treat, he'd made the mistake of going public. The attempt on his life had been professional. The car bomb that killed his wife, Maria, had been thorough. The cover-up that declared them both dead had been efficient. Only Daniel had survived, pulled from the wreckage by a sympathetic CIA handler who'd helped him disappear. Given a new identity, a new life, and a warning, stay dead, or the people who tried to kill you will finish the job and take your son too. So Dr. Daniel Reyes died in that explosion. And from his ashes rose Daniel Reyes, night janitor, invisible man, ghost hiding in plain sight. For 3 years, he'd lived this half-life, working menial jobs, moving from city to city, keeping Noah safe. Then Noah's symptoms had started. The seizures, the regression, the diagnosis that came with a death sentence unless someone developed a cure. That's when Daniel had discovered that his old research, the work he'd thought lost in the explosion, had survived. Someone at Biogenesis Technologies was using it, building on it, developing compound K17. The pediatric neurological treatment that could save his son's life had grown from seeds Daniel himself had planted years ago. So he'd done the only thing a father could do. He'd gotten a job at Biogenesis as a janitor. Night shift meant no oversight, access to empty labs, the ability to watch over the research that might save Noah. He'd been there for 8 months now, invisible in his gray uniform, ensuring that nothing delayed or disrupted the development of compound K17. Tonight had been a complication he hadn't anticipated. Daniel pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt, then moved to the kitchen. Sleep wouldn't come, it rarely did after violence. Instead, he made coffee and sat at the small dining table, opening the laptop he kept hidden in a hollowed-out medical textbook. He logged into the Biogenesis internal server using credentials he'd carefully acquired over months of patient observation. The FDA hearing was in 6 hours. Dr. Carter would present the clinical trial data, answer questions, and with luck, compound K17 would move to final approval stages. 6 more months until production. Maybe a year until it reached patients. Noah didn't have a year. Daniel's fingers drummed against the table as he reviewed the files. The clinical data was solid, excellent even. 87% efficacy in treating childhood epilepsy with genetic components, 92% in managing the neurological degradation Noah suffered from. Side effects minimal. Manufacturing process established and scalable. It should be a slam dunk, but pharmaceutical approvals were never simple. Politics, money, corporate interference, any number of factors could delay or derail the process. And tonight's attack suggested someone wanted exactly that. Daniel pulled up the security footage he'd quietly copied from Biogenesis servers over the past months. His clearance level shouldn't allow access to these files, but janitorial badges had surprising privileges when combined with social engineering and patient observation of security protocols. He found the parking garage feed and watched the attack from the camera angle. The 4 men had moved with military precision, professional contractors, not random thugs. Their equipment, their coordination, the way they'd positioned themselves to avoid camera angles until the last moment. This was expensive work. Someone had paid a lot of money to grab Dr. Evelyn Carter the night before the most important presentation of her career. But why kidnap her? If a rival company wanted to stop compound K17, there were easier ways. Bribe an FDA official. Leak false data. Launch a media campaign about safety concerns. Kidnapping the CEO was dramatic, risky, likely to draw exactly the kind of attention corporations tried to avoid. Unless... Daniel's blood ran cold as another possibility occurred to him. What if Dr. Carter wasn't the real target? What if the attack was meant to succeed just enough to cause chaos, delay the hearing, throw Biogenesis into crisis mode? Or worse, what if it was meant to expose him? He'd been careful for 3 years. No unnecessary risks, no drawing attention, no using his medical skills or combat training. But tonight he'd broken cover completely. Those 4 men would report back to whoever hired them. They'd describe the janitor who'd taken them down with a mop. And if the people hunting Daniel Reyes were still looking, if they'd expanded their search to include anyone with his specific skill set, he'd led them right to Noah. Daniel's hands shook as he closed the laptop. He'd been stupid, reckless. Maria would have been furious. She'd always said his hero complex would get him killed someday. She'd been right, just off by a few years, and wrong about who'd pay the price. But what choice had he had? Let Dr. Carter die? She was the driving force behind compound K17, the brilliant mind who'd pushed the research forward when others called it impossible. Without her, the project might stall indefinitely. And without compound K17, Noah would die. No choice at all, really. Daniel checked the time, 4:42 a.m. In 90 minutes, he needed to wake Noah, make breakfast, ensure he took his morning medications, and get him ready for Mrs. Chen. Then Daniel would shower, change into fresh clothes, and head to biogenesis, not as the night janitor, but as a concerned employee checking if Dr. Carter was all right. He needed to know if the attack had disrupted the FDA hearing, needed to ensure compound K-17 stayed on track. And maybe, if he was careful, he could figure out who'd tried to grab Dr. Carter and why. Because something was very wrong at Biogenesis Technologies. And whatever it was, it threatened the only thing Daniel had left to protect. His son's life depended on that cure. And Daniel Reyes, ghost, janitor, father, soldier, would burn the whole world down before he let anyone take that away. The morning sun barely touched the horizon when Daniel guided Noah through their careful routine. Medication first, 3 pills lined up on the dinosaur plate, taken with apple juice because water made Noah gag. Then breakfast, though the boy only managed half a waffle before his stomach protested. "Not hungry, buddy." Daniel kept his voice light, though worry gnawed at him. Noah's appetite had been declining for weeks. "My tummy feels weird." Noah pushed the plate away, his small face pinched with discomfort that no 7-year-old should know so intimately. Daniel pressed the back of his hand to Noah's forehead. No fever, thank God. "Weird how? Does it hurt?" "Just weird, like butterflies but not the good kind." Side effects from the medication, probably. The drugs keeping Noah's seizures at bay were harsh on his system, designed for adults and scaled down with imperfect precision. Every dose was a calculated risk, too little and seizures, too much and organ damage. The tightrope Daniel walked every single day. "Okay, light day then. Mrs. Chen will make you soup for lunch, and if you feel worse, you tell her immediately. Understand?" Noah nodded solemnly. At 7, he understood his condition better than most adults would. He'd spent enough time in hospitals to know that feeling weird could escalate to emergency room visits within hours. The awareness in his young eyes broke Daniel's heart daily. Mrs. Chen arrived at 6:30, as reliable as sunrise, carrying another Tupperware container. "Chicken soup," she announced in her matter-of-fact way, setting it in their refrigerator. "For lunch." "You look tired, Daniel. Bad night?" "Long shift," he replied, which was true enough. "Noah's stomach is bothering him this morning. Nothing serious, but keep an eye on him?" "Always do." Mrs. Chen's weathered face creased with concern as she studied Noah, who was arranging his dinosaurs on the coffee table with careful precision. "He's a strong boy, stronger than you give him credit for." "I know." Daniel grabbed his jacket, hesitating at the door. Leaving Noah always felt like tearing off a limb, but especially today with last night's violence still fresh and the paranoia whispering that he'd exposed them both. "My phone's on if you need anything." "Go, we'll be fine, won't we, Noah?" Noah looked up from his dinosaurs and waved. "Bye, Dad. Love you." "Love you too, buddy. Be good." The words felt heavier than usual as Daniel closed the apartment door behind him. The drive to Biogenesis took 23 minutes in morning traffic, giving Daniel too much time to think. He'd changed into civilian clothes, jeans, a button-down shirt, the kind of outfit that let him blend into the background of any professional building, not the janitor uniform. Today he needed to be someone else, though he wasn't entirely sure who. The Biogenesis campus sprawled across 10 acres of pristine landscaping and modern architecture, glass and steel monuments to pharmaceutical ambition. The main building rose 12 stories, its facade reflecting the morning sun like a beacon. Smaller research facilities dotted the grounds, connected by covered walkways where scientists hurried between buildings with briefcases and tablets. Daniel had mopped every floor in every building. He knew the layout better than most executives: the emergency exits, the blind spots in camera coverage, the labs where researchers worked late into the night chasing breakthroughs. In 8 months of invisible observation, he'd learned that Biogenesis was more than just the company developing his son's cure. It was a pressure cooker of ambition, corporate politics, and brilliant minds working at the edge of scientific possibility. And someone inside this gleaming complex had tried to destroy it all last night. The main lobby buzzed with unusual energy for 7 a.m. Clusters of employees stood in tight groups, voices low but urgent. Security presence had tripled, guards Daniel recognized from night shift now working overtime, stationed at every entrance with expressions that suggested they hadn't slept either. Daniel approached the main desk where Sandra, the day receptionist, was fielding phone calls with frazzled efficiency. She looked up as he approached, her professional smile flickering with confusion. "Can I help you?" "Daniel Reyes, night cleaning staff. I heard about the incident last night. Is Dr. Carter okay?" Sandra's expression shifted to recognition. "Oh, you're the one who—" She lowered her voice, glancing around. "Yes, she's fine. Thanks to you, apparently. Everyone's talking about it." Exactly what Daniel had feared. Attention was poison. "I just happened to be there. Is she in today?" "In her office since 5 a.m. The FDA hearing is in 2 hours." Sandra leaned closer, dropping to a whisper. "Between you and me, security's going crazy. They brought in a whole new team, running background checks on everyone. It's chaos." Background checks. Daniel's fabricated identity would hold up to standard scrutiny. The CIA had done thorough work, but intensive investigation might reveal inconsistencies. He needed to stay away from security's radar while still ensuring the hearing proceeded smoothly. "Thanks, Sandra. Glad she's okay." Daniel moved through the lobby toward the elevators, conscious of the security cameras tracking his movement. He'd spent months being invisible, and now people were noticing him. The receptionist. Those 2 researchers by the coffee station, whispering and glancing his way. The security guard whose eyes followed him with new assessment. He'd become visible, and visibility was death for a ghost. The executive floor hummed with pre-hearing tension. Assistants rushed between offices with stacks of documents. Dr. Morrison, the chief scientific officer, stood outside his office reviewing notes with 2 FDA lawyers. Someone had wheeled in a catering cart loaded with coffee and pastries that no one seemed to be eating. Daniel navigated the chaos until he reached the door marked Dr. Evelyn Carter, Chief Executive Officer. It stood slightly ajar, voices filtering through. "Absolutely cannot postpone. We've scheduled this hearing for 6 months." That was Dr. Carter, her voice sharp with stress. "But given last night's events, surely the FDA would understand." An older male voice, probably Marcus Webb, the company's legal counsel. "Understand what? That someone tried to kidnap me, so we're hiding? That makes us look guilty, like we have something to hide. No. The hearing proceeds as scheduled. Evelyn, be reasonable. You were attacked less than 8 hours ago. You should be in a hospital, not presenting clinical data to federal regulators." "I'm fine, Marcus. I've been running on fumes for months anyway. What's one more day?" Daniel knocked softly on the doorframe. The conversation cut off abruptly. A moment later, Dr. Carter appeared in the doorway, and Daniel had to suppress his reaction to her appearance. She looked like she'd aged 5 years overnight. The confident CEO from the parking garage had been replaced by someone running on pure determination and caffeine. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped a tablet, but her spine remained straight, her chin lifted, the posture of someone who refused to break no matter how much pressure crushed down. "Mr. Reyes?" Surprise and something else, relief, flickered across her face. "I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to make sure you were all right, and to apologize." "Apologize?" She stepped out of her office, closing the door behind her. "You saved my life. What could you possibly need to apologize for?" "I should have acted faster, prevented them from getting as close as they did." Dr. Carter studied him with those sharp, analytical eyes, the same eyes that had built a pharmaceutical empire through sheer intellectual force. Daniel felt exposed under that gaze, like a specimen on a slide. "Walk with me," she said finally, moving toward the elevators without waiting for a response. Daniel fell into step beside her, hyper-aware of the attention they were drawing. The CEO and the janitor who'd become a hero. Great. Exactly the story that would spread through the company like wildfire. They rode the elevator in silence to the 5th floor, where Dr. Carter led him through a maze of corridors to a small outdoor terrace that most employees didn't know existed. The morning air was cool, and the city sprawled below them, just beginning to wake. Dr. Carter moved to the railing, gripping it with white-knuckled intensity. "I couldn't breathe in there. Too many people. Too many questions." She turned to face him. The police came by this morning. They have more questions for you. Your statement wasn't complete. I told them what happened. You told them a version of what happened. A simplified version that conveniently leaves out how a night janitor took down 4 professional attackers in under a minute with a mop. She crossed her arms, her scientist's mind clearly working through a problem. I've been replaying it in my head all night. The way you moved, the precision. That wasn't luck or adrenaline, Mr. Reyes. That was training, extensive, specialized training. Daniel kept his expression neutral. Sometimes people surprise you. Don't insult my intelligence. I've spent my entire career studying patterns, analyzing data, looking for the truth beneath surface observations. You're a puzzle that doesn't fit its box. She paused, then asked the question he'd been dreading. Who are you really? The morning sun caught her face, illuminating the exhaustion and determination in equal measure. Daniel recognized that look. He'd seen it in mirrors during his deployment, in the eyes of soldiers who'd pushed past human limits because lives depended on it. Dr. Carter was fighting her own war, just with Petri dishes instead of rifles. He could lie, should lie. Every survival instinct screamed at him to deflect, disappear, return to the safety of invisibility. But something in her eyes, the desperate need to understand, to know that someone real existed beneath the uniform, made him hesitate. I'm exactly who I appear to be, Daniel said carefully. A janitor trying to support his son. And before you were a janitor? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Daniel could feel the weight of his past pressing against the present, all those carefully constructed walls threatening to crack under the pressure of her scrutiny. Everyone has a past, Dr. Carter. Mine isn't relevant to your present crisis. Isn't it? She pushed off the railing, moving closer. 4 men tried to kidnap me hours before the most important presentation of my career. They were professionals, Mr. Reyes. They knew my schedule, my security arrangements, exactly when I'd be vulnerable. That suggests someone inside Biogenesis provided information. And then you appeared, a janitor who fights like special forces and somehow happened to be in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. Daniel's blood ran cold. You think I was involved? No, she said immediately. If you were part of it, you would have let them take me. But I think you're connected somehow. I think there's more happening here than a simple kidnapping attempt. And I think you know more than you're saying. She was too smart for her own good. Daniel had known that from reading her research papers, watching her navigate corporate politics, observing how she'd built Biogenesis from a struggling startup into an industry leader. But knowing someone was brilliant and experiencing their analytical focus directed at you were very different things. What happened last night, Daniel said slowly, was someone trying to stop your FDA hearing. Whether they wanted you dead, kidnapped, or just traumatized enough to postpone, I don't know. But I know this. Compound K17 threatens billion-dollar interests. Pharmaceutical companies, medical device manufacturers, research institutions that built their reputations on treatments that your drug will obsolete. You've made powerful enemies, Dr. Carter. Evelyn, she corrected absently. And yes, I know about the enemies. What I don't know is why a janitor cares enough to risk his life protecting a drug development hearing. Because my son will die without it, Daniel thought. Because your company is developing the cure from research I started, from work that cost my wife her life and forced me into this half-existence. Because everything I am, everything I was, has led to this moment where your survival and my son's survival are the same equation. But he couldn't say any of that. Instead, he said, some fights are worth fighting, even for janitors. Evelyn studied him for a long moment, and Daniel could practically see her filing away data, building hypotheses, testing them against observed evidence. Finally, she nodded slowly. All right, keep your secrets, Mr. Reyes. For now. She checked her watch. I have to go present clinical trial data in 90 minutes, but this conversation isn't over. Good luck with the hearing? Luck. She laughed without humor. I'll need more than luck. I'll need divine intervention and a minor miracle. The FDA has been breathing down our necks for months, looking for any excuse to delay approval. Last night's incident will only make them more cautious. The data is solid, Daniel said, then caught himself. How would a janitor know that? Evelyn's eyebrow arched. You've read our clinical trials? I clean the research labs at night. Sometimes I read things while I work. Force of habit from college. The lie came smoothly, but Daniel could see she wasn't entirely buying it. What did you study in college? Does it matter? Humor me. Biology, pre-med track, life got complicated. That much was true at least. Life had gotten extremely complicated when the military recruited him straight out of medical school. Evelyn's expression softened slightly. What stopped you? Family responsibilities? Noah's face flashed through Daniel's mind. Some dreams have to wait. I'm sorry, that must have been difficult. The sympathy in her voice was genuine, and it cut deeper than Daniel expected. He'd spent 3 years avoiding real connections, keeping everyone at arm's length where they couldn't ask questions or see past his carefully constructed facade. But Evelyn Carter had managed to slip past his defenses in less than 12 hours. Dangerous. She was dangerous to his cover, his security, his son's safety. He needed to extract himself from this conversation and return to blessed invisibility. I should let you prepare, Daniel said, moving toward the door. Wait. Evelyn pulled a business card from her jacket pocket and pressed it into his hand. My personal cell number. If you see anything unusual, anything that concerns you, call me immediately. I don't care what time it is. Daniel looked down at the card. Expensive cardstock, embossed lettering, the weight of expectation in his palm. I'm just a janitor, Dr. Carter. What would I see that security wouldn't? You're not just anything, Mr. Reyes. We both know that. She held his gaze. And people who are invisible see things that those of us in the spotlight miss. So watch. And if you see something, tell me. She left him standing on the terrace, the business card burning in his hand like a promise he couldn't afford to make. Daniel remained there for several minutes after she'd gone, thinking through the implications. Evelyn Carter now saw him, really saw him. That made him both an asset and a liability. He could use her attention to better protect the Compound K-17 project, but her attention could also draw his past out of the shadows where it had stayed safely buried. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. No arresting. Ate some soup. Color better. Relief flooded through him. Noah was okay. Whatever chaos unfolded at Biogenesis today, his son was safe and stable. That was what mattered. That was all that mattered. Daniel pocketed the business card and made his way back through the building. He had 2 hours before the FDA hearing began. 2 hours to do what he did best. Move through Biogenesis like a ghost, watching, listening, gathering the information that might explain who wanted Evelyn Carter out of the picture and why. The executive floor had emptied, most personnel already heading to the conference center where the hearing would be held. Daniel slipped into a stairwell and descended to the 3rd floor where the primary research laboratories operated. He'd spent countless nights cleaning these labs, learning their rhythms and secrets. Dr. Chen's team worked on protein synthesis. Dr. Okonkwo's group handled animal trials. And Dr. Sarah Vance's team, she was the lead researcher on Compound K-17, the brilliant neurochemist who'd taken Daniel's original research and transformed it into something revolutionary. Daniel had never spoken to Dr. Vance beyond the occasional polite nod. She worked late, often staying until midnight running tests or analyzing data. He'd watched her through lab windows during his cleaning shifts, observed her dedication, her frustration when experiments failed, her quiet joy when breakthroughs happened. She was the unsung hero of the project. Evelyn might be the face and the vision, but Sarah Vance was the hands making the dream real. Her lab was empty now, everyone having left for the hearing. Daniel used his janitorial keycard to enter. The one advantage of working nights was that facilities management had access everywhere and moved quickly through the space. The lab was organized chaos, workbenches crowded with equipment, computers running continuous analysis programs, whiteboards covered in chemical equations that Daniel recognized from his own research years ago. He saw his influence in those equations, the protein targeting method he'd developed, the delivery mechanism he'd pioneered. Sarah Vance had taken his foundation and built a cathedral. Daniel wasn't sure what he was looking for until he found it, a filing cabinet in Sarah's office, partially open. Inside were notebooks, the old-fashioned kind researchers used to hand record observations before transferring them to digital formats. He pulled one out, flipping through pages of meticulous notes dated over the past 6 months. Everything looked normal until he reached entries from 2 weeks ago. Sarah's handwriting became agitated, words underlined multiple times. Contamination in batch 7C. Deliberate? Seals broken? Protocols violated? Who has access? Several pages later. Missing data files. Backup corrupted. Someone is sabotaging the trials. Daniel's blood turned to ice. He flipped forward, reading faster. Sarah had documented a pattern of small disruptions over weeks, samples going missing, equipment malfunctioning, computer files becoming corrupted. Any one incident could be accident or human error. Together, they suggested something far more sinister. The most recent entry was from 3 days ago. Approached Marcus Webb about security concerns. He dismissed me, said I was paranoid, stressed from the hearing pressure. But I know what I saw. Someone is trying to destroy K-17 from the inside. Need to tell Evelyn, but she's already drowning. Don't want to add to her stress before FDA. We'll wait until after hearing. Hope that's not a mistake. Daniel photographed the pages with his phone, careful to return the notebook exactly as he'd found it. His mind raced through possibilities. Internal sabotage. Corporate espionage. Someone inside Biogenesis had been systematically attacking the K-17 project, and when subtle sabotage hadn't worked, they'd escalated to kidnapping the CEO. But who? And more importantly, were they acting alone, or was this part of something bigger? The hearing started in 45 minutes. If the saboteur wanted to stop it, they'd make their move soon. Daniel needed to be there, needed to watch for threats that security wouldn't recognize because they didn't understand the science or the stakes. He left the lab, locking it carefully behind him, and headed for the conference center. The building sat at the edge of the campus, a modern facility designed for large presentations and company-wide events. Today, it would host the FDA review panel, Biogenesis executives, invited observers, and enough lawyers to fill a small courthouse. Daniel slipped in through a side entrance, nodding at the security guard who recognized him from night shifts. The main auditorium was filling rapidly, over 200 people, all buzzing with the particular energy of high-stakes professional proceedings. The stage was set up with a long table for the FDA panel, a podium for presentations, and massive screens that would display data and slides. Evelyn stood near the stage with Dr. Vance and Dr. Morrison, reviewing last-minute details. Even from across the room, Daniel could see the tension in Evelyn's shoulders, the way she gripped her notes too tightly. He found a seat in the back row, positioned where he could watch the entire room. Old habits from his military days. Always know your exits, always scan for threats, always position yourself where you can react fastest. The lights dimmed. The FDA panel entered through a side door. 5 officials in business attire carrying tablets and briefcases, their faces professionally neutral. They took their seats at the long table, and the lead official, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, tapped her microphone. Good morning. This hearing will now come to order. We are here to review Biogenesis Technologies' application for expedited approval of compound K-17, a novel treatment for pediatric neurological disorders. Dr. Carter, you may begin your presentation. Evelyn stepped to the podium, and for a moment the exhaustion fell away. This was her element: scientific presentation, data analysis, the careful construction of logical arguments that led to inevitable conclusions. When she spoke, her voice was clear and confident. Thank you. Members of the panel, distinguished guests, colleagues, today I will present data demonstrating that compound K-17 represents a fundamental breakthrough in treating pediatric epilepsy and associated neurological conditions. Our clinical trials have shown unprecedented efficacy with minimal side effects, offering hope to thousands of children who currently have no effective treatment options. The first slide appeared on the screens: molecular structure, elegant and complex. Daniel recognized the protein configurations, saw where Sarah Vance had refined his original work. It was beautiful, in the way that life-saving science could be beautiful. Evelyn walked through the data methodically. Trial phases, patient selection, dosing protocols, response rates. The numbers were staggering: 87% of patients showing significant improvement, 92% in specific genetic subgroups. Side effects: minimal and manageable. Manufacturing process established and scalable. Daniel found himself leaning forward, despite knowing the data by heart. This was Noah's cure being presented, Noah's hope being laid out in charts and graphs and statistical analysis. Every percentage point represented children like his son, children who might actually see their 10th birthday, their graduation, their first love. The FDA panel asked questions, probing for weaknesses in methodology or concerns about long-term effects. Evelyn answered each one with practiced precision, supported by Dr. Vance's technical expertise and Dr. Morrison's clinical experience. It was a masterclass in scientific presentation. Then, 40 minutes into the hearing, the fire alarm blared. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, strobe lights flashing in disorienting patterns. For a moment, everyone froze, that split second of confusion when the brain tries to determine if a threat is real or false. Daniel was already moving. He'd lived through enough attacks to know that fire alarms made excellent covers for something worse. While everyone else was standing, gathering belongings, beginning the confused shuffle towards exits, Daniel pushed against the crowd, heading for the stage. Evelyn stood frozen at the podium, her presentation interrupted mid-sentence. Dr. Vance was looking around confused. Dr. Morrison had already started for the nearest exit. The FDA panel was being ushered out by security through their private door. "Dr. Carter!" Daniel reached the stage, vaulting up the side stairs. "We need to move. Now!" She blinked at him, still processing the interruption. "It's just a fire alarm, probably a malfunction, or it's cover for something else. We're not taking chances. Come with me." Something in his tone cut through her confusion. She grabbed her tablet and notes, letting Daniel guide her off the stage toward a side exit he'd scouted earlier. Dr. Vance followed, her scientist's mind clearly working through the same possibilities Daniel had already calculated. They emerged into a service corridor that ran behind the conference center. The hallway was empty, emergency lighting casting everything in harsh shadows. Daniel led them quickly away from the main building, toward a maintenance exit that would let them out near the research facilities. "Where are we going?" Evelyn demanded, but she didn't resist his direction. "Somewhere secure until we know if this is real or—" The explosion cut him off. Not close, maybe 100 yards away, but powerful enough that they felt it through the floor, heard the crump of detonating charges and shattering glass. Screams echoed from the main conference center. More alarms joined the first, creating a symphony of crisis. Daniel's military training kicked in completely. He pushed both women against the wall, shielding them with his body, while his mind processed threat vectors. The explosion had come from the south side of the building, near the main entrance. Not close enough to be immediately dangerous to them, but close enough to cause casualties and chaos. "Stay here," Daniel ordered. "Don't move until I come back." "You're not going out there," Evelyn said, but her voice shook. "Someone just bombed your conference center, Dr. Carter. I need to see if there are more threats." He met her eyes. "Trust me, I've done this before." Before she could respond, Daniel was moving back down the corridor toward the chaos. Behind him, he heard Dr. Vance say quietly, "Who the hell is that man?" A question Daniel couldn't afford to let Evelyn answer honestly. He reached a window overlooking the conference center courtyard and froze at what he saw. The main entrance was a smoking ruin, glass and concrete scattered across the plaza. Emergency responders were already arriving. Biogenesis had good security protocols. But that wasn't what caught his attention. 3 vans had pulled up to the chaos, unmarked but clearly coordinated. Men in tactical gear were pouring out, moving with military precision through the confusion. They weren't helping evacuate. They were searching. Searching for someone specific, and Daniel would bet his son's life he knew who. They'd failed to kidnap Evelyn last night, so they'd escalated. Create chaos, grab her in the confusion, disappear before real law enforcement could establish control. It was a bold plan, the kind that required serious backing and serious desperation. Daniel pulled out his phone and dialed 911, keeping his voice calm and professional. "There's been an explosion at Biogenesis Technologies Conference Center. Multiple injuries. But you need to know, there are also armed men on site who are not security or first responders. 3 unmarked vans, approximately 15 men in tactical gear. This is an active hostile situation." He hung up before the operator could ask questions, then texted the same information to the number on Evelyn's business card. She needed to know what they were facing. Then Daniel ran back to where he'd left the 2 women. his mind already calculating escape routes and defensive positions, because those men would search the building systematically, and eventually they'd find the service corridors. Eventually, they'd find Evelyn Carter. And this time, Daniel wouldn't have the element of surprise. This time, he'd have to reveal exactly what kind of ghost he really was. Daniel found Evelyn and Dr. Vance exactly where he'd left them, pressed against the corridor wall with the wide-eyed terror of civilians suddenly thrust into a war zone. Evelyn's knuckles were white around her tablet, while Sarah Vance had her phone out, trying to get a signal in the concrete-reinforced hallway. "We need to move," Daniel said, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd navigated far worse situations. "Now." "What's happening out there?" Evelyn pushed off the wall, her CEO instincts fighting against the fear. "I heard an explosion. How many people are hurt? What you need to do is survive the next hour." Daniel gripped her arm, not roughly, but firmly enough to cut through the shock. "There are armed men searching this building. Professional operators, not security or first responders. They're looking for you." Sarah's face went pale. "Oh, God. This is because of what I found, isn't it? The sabotage. I should have said something sooner. You found sabotage?" Evelyn turned to her lead researcher, confusion and betrayal warring in her expression. "What are you talking about?" "Later," Daniel interrupted. "Right now we move or we die. Your choice, Dr. Carter, but make it fast." The harsh words snapped both women into action. Evelyn nodded once, that decisive gesture Daniel had seen her use in board meetings when making million-dollar decisions. "All right, where?" Daniel's mind had already mapped their options during the sprint back to them. The conference center was compromised. The main research building would be the attackers' second target. Too obvious, too exposed. They needed somewhere unexpected, somewhere a cleaning crew would know, but executives wouldn't think to hide. Sub-basement level of Building 3, the old server room. It's been decommissioned for 2 years, but the access codes still work. Daniel started moving down the corridor, forcing them to follow. Security never patrols there because it's technically not operational space anymore. "How do you know that?" Sarah asked, practically jogging to keep up with his pace. "I clean there, or used to before they cut it from the rotation." The lie came easily, but the truth was, Daniel had scouted every abandoned space in the Biogenesis campus during his first month. Old habits from his military days. Always know where to hide, always have an extraction route, always assume you'll need to disappear. They reached a service stairwell, and Daniel paused at the door, listening. Footsteps echoed from above, multiple sets, moving with tactical precision. The attackers were already in the building, working their way through each floor systematically. "Quietly," Daniel whispered, easing the door open, "and stay close." The stairwell was harsh concrete and metal railings, designed for function rather than aesthetics. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly green, and their footsteps echoed despite Daniel's best efforts at silence. They descended quickly, passing sub-level 1 where the main laboratories hummed with abandoned experiments, then sub-level 2 where equipment storage and mechanical systems lived. At sub-level 3, Daniel led them through a maze of corridors that smelled of dust and neglect. Pipes ran along the ceiling, some dripping condensation that had left rust stains on the concrete floor. The air was cooler here, almost cold, as if the building's warmth couldn't quite penetrate this deep. "Here." Daniel stopped at a nondescript door marked Server Storage B, decommissioned. He pulled out his key card, the master facilities card he'd carefully cloned months ago, and swiped it. The lock clicked green and the heavy door swung inward with a groan of unused hinges. The room beyond was exactly as Daniel remembered. Rows of empty server racks, a few forgotten monitors on a desk, cables snaking across the floor like technological vines. Dust covered everything in a fine gray layer, and the only light came from a small window near the ceiling that looked out at ground level, showing nothing but a sliver of daylight and the edge of a dumpster. "We're hiding in a closet?" Sarah's voice carried an edge of hysteria. "This is your plan?" "This is a defensible position with one entrance, no windows at ground level, and it's off the building schematics that anyone outside facilities would have access to." Daniel closed the door behind them and engaged the manual deadbolt, another feature of older secure rooms that newer buildings had abandoned for electronic locks. "We're invisible here, at least for a while." Evelyn sank into an old office chair, her tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. You texted me. 15 armed men. Who are they, Daniel? And don't tell me you don't know. You're thinking 3 steps ahead of everyone else in this crisis. There it was again, that sharp intelligence cutting through shock and fear to see the patterns beneath. Daniel had known from the moment he'd saved her that Evelyn Carter would become a problem, not an enemy, but someone who saw too much, asked too many questions, refused to accept comfortable lies when uncomfortable truths lurked beneath the surface. Corporate mercenaries, Daniel said, choosing his words carefully. Ex-military, probably private security contractors. The kind you hire when you need deniability and don't care about body count. Someone wants you badly enough to bomb a federal hearing and assault a pharmaceutical company in broad daylight. That level of desperation suggests very high stakes. The cure, Sarah said quietly. She'd pulled her phone out again, scrolling through something with shaking hands. It has to be about case 17. Nothing else at Biogenesis is valuable enough to justify this kind of attack. Walk me through it, Evelyn demanded, her CEO voice returning as shock gave way to anger. You said you found sabotage. What exactly did you find? And why am I only hearing about it now? Sarah's face flushed with guilt and defiance. Because you've been drowning in FDA prep for months, and I wasn't sure. Not at first. Little things kept going wrong, samples contaminated, data files corrupted, equipment failures. Any one incident could be accident or human error, but the pattern was too consistent, too targeted. Someone was systematically attacking the K-17 project. Show me. Evelyn held out her hand and Sarah passed over her phone. While Evelyn scrolled through what Daniel assumed were photos of Sarah's research notes, he moved to the small window and carefully peered out. The view showed only the edge of the campus, a service road, and part of the parking area. Emergency vehicles had arrived, real ones this time. Fire trucks and ambulances with their lights painting the day in red and blue. But he also saw the unmarked vans still parked near the conference center. They weren't leaving. They were settling in, preparing for an extended search. This is damning, Evelyn said, her voice tight with controlled fury. Why didn't you bring this to me immediately? I tried. I went to Marcus Webb 2 weeks ago with my concerns. He dismissed me, said I was stressed, implied I was being paranoid. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. He made me feel like I was crazy, like I was seeing conspiracies where there was only bad luck. So I decided to wait until after the hearing to push the issue. I thought... Her voice cracked. I thought I had time. Daniel turned from the window, pieces clicking together in his mind. Marcus Webb, your legal counsel. He had access to everything, security schedules, employee information, research protocols. You think Marcus is involved? Evelyn stood abruptly, the chair rolling backward. That's impossible. He's been with Biogenesis from the beginning. He helped me build this company, which means he knows exactly how to dismantle it. Daniel pulled out his own phone, opening the photos he'd taken of Sarah's notes. May I? Sarah nodded, and Daniel forwarded the images to his secure cloud storage, a precaution in case his phone was destroyed or confiscated. Then he handed it to Evelyn. Look at the timeline of incidents Dr. Vance documented. Now, think about who would benefit most from K-17 failing to get FDA approval. Evelyn studied the images, her expression shifting from anger to calculation to a cold fury that reminded Daniel why she'd become CEO at 38. Competing pharmaceutical companies, medical device manufacturers whose seizure monitoring equipment would become obsolete, research institutions that built their reputations on treatments we're about to make irrelevant. She looked up. The list is long, and they all have billions of dollars in motivation. And Marcus Webb has been your legal counsel for 7 years, Daniel continued. He knows every vulnerability in your security, every weakness in your protocols. He's been in every board meeting, every strategy session. If someone wanted to buy inside information, he'd be the perfect target. Or he approached them first, Sarah added, her voice bitter. Maybe someone made him an offer too good to refuse. Sabotage the project, delay FDA approval long enough for competitors to catch up. He'd be rich and untouchable. Evelyn's tablet slipped from her fingers, clattering on the concrete floor. He was pushing me to postpone the hearing this morning, said I should recover from the attack, take time to regroup. I thought he was being protective. She laughed. a harsh sound without humor. He was trying to buy his clients more time. We need proof, Daniel said. Suspicion isn't enough. If we're going to stop this, we need evidence that connects Webb to the sabotage and the attacks. His office, Sarah said immediately. He keeps physical files in a safe. Old school, doesn't trust everything to digital storage. If he's been coordinating with outside parties, there might be paper trails. His office is on the executive floor. Evelyn's mind was clearly working through the logistics. Surrounded by security cameras, card access doors, and right now probably crawling with armed mercenaries searching for me. Then we don't go to his office. Daniel moved back to the window, checking the campus layout in his mind. We go to his car. Both women stared at him. His car? Evelyn repeated. Think about it. Webb was at the hearing when the bomb went off. He evacuated with everyone else, which means his car is still in the executive parking garage. People keep all sorts of things in their cars. Files they're reviewing, laptops, phones they don't want on company networks. Daniel turned to face them. If Webb is dirty, he'd be smart enough not to leave incriminating evidence in his office where IT security might find it. But his personal vehicle? That's his private space. That's a lot of assumptions, Sarah said. It's the best lead we have, and while those mercenaries are searching the buildings, they won't expect us to move toward the parking garage. Daniel pulled up a campus map on his phone. There's a service tunnel that runs from this building to the executive garage. Maintenance uses it to access the HVAC systems. If we move fast and quiet, we can be there and back before they expand their search perimeter. Evelyn met his eyes, and Daniel saw the moment she made her decision. You're not a janitor. I don't know what you are, but you're not just a janitor. Does it matter right now? It will. Later. But right now? She straightened her shoulders, that CEO posture returning. Right now you're the only reason I'm alive, and you seem to know what you're doing, so we follow your lead. Thank you for your trust, Daniel said, and meant it. But understand something. I'm good at staying alive in bad situations. Keeping 2 civilians alive while infiltrating a hostile zone is significantly harder. You do exactly what I say, when I say it, no questions. Agreed? Both women nodded. Then let's move. The service tunnel was worse than Daniel remembered. Narrow, claustrophobic, lined with pipes that dripped rust-colored water and electrical conduits that hummed with unsettling intensity. They had to walk single file, with Daniel leading and constantly checking his phone's compass to ensure they were heading the right direction. Behind him, he could hear Evelyn's controlled breathing and Sarah's occasional whispered curse when she stumbled over debris. The tunnel stretched for what felt like miles, but was probably only 300 yards. Emergency lighting provided bare minimum visibility, casting shadows that moved wrong and made Daniel's combat instincts scream false warnings. He kept one hand on the pipe along the wall, using it as a guide while his other hand hovered near his phone, ready to use its flashlight if necessary. How did you know about this tunnel? Evelyn whispered from behind him. I explore. It's part of the job, knowing the buildings inside and out. Not entirely a lie. He had explored every inch of biogenesis, but not for janitorial reasons, for exactly this reason, knowing how to move unseen, how to hide, how to fight if necessary. They reached a junction where the tunnel split in 3 directions. Daniel consulted his mental map, chose the rightmost path, and continued forward. The air grew slightly warmer here, suggesting they were approaching a more actively used section of the building's infrastructure. Finally, they reached a ladder leading up to a maintenance hatch. Daniel climbed first, pressing his ear against the metal surface and listening for movement above. Silence. He carefully released the locking mechanism and pushed the hatch open a few inches, peering through the gap. The executive parking garage stretched out above them, significantly emptier than usual. Most employees had evacuated after the explosion, their cars left behind as they fled on foot or were taken away by emergency services. Daniel counted maybe 20 vehicles remaining, including a silver Lexus sedan parked 3 spots from the maintenance hatch. Marcus Webb's car. Clear, Daniel whispered down. Come up slowly and stay low. He emerged from the hatch into the shadowy space between 2 concrete support pillars, then helped first Sarah and then Evelyn up. The garage felt eerie in its emptiness. The site of last night's attack now transformed into an abandoned cathedral of concrete and shadow. That's his car, Evelyn said, pointing at the Lexus. How do we get in? Daniel pulled a small case from his pocket, lock picks he'd carried out of habit since leaving the military. Some tools you never stopped needing, even when you hoped you'd never need them again. I can get us in, but once we're inside, we need to be fast. If Webb has remote monitoring on his vehicle, he'll know the moment someone opens it. Then we'd better make it count, Sarah said. Daniel approached the Lexus, scanning for obvious security systems. High-end model, probably equipped with standard alarm and maybe GPS tracking. He'd bypassed far more sophisticated systems in his previous life, but always with proper equipment and planning. This was improvisation, and improvisation in hostile territory got people killed. He worked the lockpicks into the driver's door, feeling for the tumblers with practiced precision. It took 45 seconds, longer than he liked, before the lock clicked open. No alarm sounded. Small blessings. In. Fast. Dr. Vance, you check the glove compartment. Dr. Carter, look under the seats and in the side pockets. I'll check the trunk. They worked with silent efficiency, hands moving through Marcus Webb's personal space with the urgency of people who knew time was running out. The car was obsessively neat. No trash, no loose items, everything organized with anal precision. The kind of car that belonged to someone who controlled every aspect of their environment. Nothing in the glove box except the manual and registration, Sarah reported. Same here, Evelyn said, checking under the passenger seat. Wait, there's something. She pulled out a slim leather portfolio, the kind lawyers used for important documents. It's locked. Give it here. Daniel took the portfolio and examined the small combination lock. 3 digits. He tried Webb's birth date. Nothing. The founding year of biogenesis. Nothing. Then on instinct, he tried the molecular weight of one of the key compounds in K17 using just the first 3 digits. The lock clicked open. How did you know that? Evelyn demanded. Lucky guess. Daniel handed her the portfolio. What's inside? Evelyn flipped it open, and even in the dim garage lighting, Daniel could see her face go pale. Correspondence between Marcus and someone named Victor Kane. He's the CEO of Nexus Pharmaceuticals, one of our biggest competitors. Sarah leaned over Evelyn's shoulder, reading quickly. They're discussing compensation for consulting services. $20 million paid to an offshore account. And look at the dates. These letters go back 18 months. Almost to when we started the K17 clinical trials. Keep reading, Daniel urged, watching the garage entrance for any signs of movement. Evelyn flipped through more pages, her expression growing darker with each one. He's been feeding them everything. Trial data, FDA submission timelines, our manufacturing processes. And here, she stopped on a page, her hand trembling. Instructions for neutralizing the primary asset. That's me. He helped them plan my kidnapping. There's more, Sarah said, pointing to the last page. A list of targets. Your name, Evelyn, mine, Dr. Morrison, even some of the junior researchers working on K17. We're all on a list titled Priority Eliminations. The words hung in the air like poison gas. This wasn't just corporate espionage or patent theft. This was systematic elimination of everyone who understood the science behind compound K17, designed to set the project back years and give competitors time to develop their own versions. We need to get this to the police, Evelyn said, her voice shaking. This is evidence of conspiracy, attempted murder. The police can't help us right now, Daniel interrupted. Those mercenaries outside, they're not going to wait for legal proceedings. Webb knows the FBI will investigate after today's attack. He's gone all in, which means he needs to finish this now. He needs you dead, and this evidence destroyed. Then what do we do? Sarah asked. Daniel's mind raced through scenarios, calculating odds and outcomes with the cold precision that had kept him alive through 2 tours in Afghanistan. They had evidence, but evidence was useless if they didn't survive to present it. The mercenaries would expand their search eventually. The sub-basement server room was safe for now, but not indefinitely. They needed to either escape the campus entirely or find a way to turn the tables. We expose him, Daniel said. Publicly, dramatically, in a way that makes it impossible to cover up. Webb's entire plan depends on deniability and corporate secrecy, so we take that away. How? Evelyn demanded. The FDA hearing was being recorded, right? Video feed, transcript, everything documented for federal records? Yes, but the explosion disrupted. Understanding dawned in Evelyn's eyes. The recording servers are in the conference center's technical room. If we can access them, we can restart the hearing virtually, broadcast it over the internet, present the evidence live where thousands of people can see it. Exactly. Webb can kill us, but he can't kill a live stream that's already been seen by thousands. Daniel checked his phone. How long would it take to set up? If the servers survived the explosion, 10 minutes. But the technical room is in the conference center, exactly where those mercenaries are concentrated. Then we create a diversion. Daniel pulled up his contacts, scrolling to a number he'd hoped never to use. A contact from his old life, someone who owed him a favor and had the resources to help. I can arrange a distraction that will pull them away from the conference center for at least 15 minutes. But once we start that broadcast, there's no turning back. Webb will know exactly where we are, and he'll send everything he has to stop us. Can we hold them off for 10 minutes? Sarah asked. Daniel thought of Noah, asleep in their apartment, depending on his father to come home. Thought of the thousands of children like Noah who needed compound K-17 to survive. Thought of his wife, Maria, who died because he'd tried to do the right thing and exposed the wrong people. He'd failed to protect Maria. But he could still protect Noah, could still ensure the cure survived, even if he didn't. I can hold them off for as long as it takes, Daniel said quietly. Evelyn studied him with those sharp eyes, and he knew she heard what he hadn't said, that he was preparing to die to give them enough time. You have a son, the junior researchers gossip. They say you have a 7-year-old boy. Noah, he's 7. He has the same condition K-17 is designed to treat. The confession hung between them, and Daniel saw understanding bloom in Evelyn's expression. All the pieces clicking into place, why a janitor fought like special forces, why he'd been at biogenesis for exactly 8 months starting right when K-17 entered final trial phases, why he was willing to die to protect the project. You're not here by accident, she whispered. You came here to protect the cure, to protect your son. I came here because my son deserves to live, and your company is the only thing standing between him and a funeral. Daniel met her eyes. So yes, I'll hold them off for as long as it takes, because if K-17 dies today, so does Noah, and I won't let that happen. Sarah wiped at her eyes, tears streaming down her face. How long does he have? Your son. Without treatment? Maybe a year. 2 if we're lucky. With K-17, Daniel's voice cracked despite his best efforts. He could have a normal life, college, career, grandchildren, everything. Evelyn reached out and gripped his shoulder, her hand surprisingly strong. Then we don't waste the chance you're giving us. We make it count. First, we need to get back to the server room safely, Daniel said, forcing his emotions back into the locked box where they belonged. Then I'll make the call for the distraction. Once it starts, you two head for the conference center technical room and get that broadcast running. I'll cover your approach and buy you time. What will the distraction be? Sarah asked. Daniel smiled without humor. Something loud. Come on, we need to move before... The screech of tires cut him off. A black SUV roared into the parking garage, followed by 2 more. Men in tactical gear poured out, weapons visible, moving with military precision. They were conducting a systematic search of the vehicles, working their way through the garage row by row. And Daniel, Evelyn, and Sarah were trapped in the open, 30 feet from the nearest cover, holding evidence that would get them killed if discovered. Daniel's combat instincts took over. He shoved the portfolio into Evelyn's hands. Run. Back to the maintenance hatch. Now. What about you? Evelyn hissed. I'm the distraction. Daniel pulled out his phone and pressed a button, triggering an app he'd installed months ago. Throughout the biogenesis campus, every fire alarm began to sound simultaneously, joined moments later by every emergency alert system. The cacophony was deafening, disorienting, designed to create maximum chaos. The mercenaries in the parking garage froze, confusion rippling through their formation. Their radios crackled with contradictory orders, and in that moment of hesitation, Daniel moved. He sprinted toward the nearest vehicle and dove behind it just as the first mercenary spotted him and opened fire. Bullets sparked off concrete and metal, the gunshots echoing through the garage like thunder. But Daniel was already moving again, using the cars for cover, drawing their attention away from where Evelyn and Sarah were scrambling toward the maintenance hatch. "Contact in the parking garage," one of the mercenaries shouted into his radio. "Single target, male, armed." Daniel wasn't armed, but they didn't know that. He grabbed a piece of broken concrete and hurled it at the opposite end of the garage. It shattered against a pillar, and 3 mercenaries immediately pivoted toward the sound, weapons tracking. "Good. Keep looking at me. Don't look at the 2 women dropping into a maintenance tunnel behind you." Daniel caught a glimpse of Evelyn and Sarah disappearing into the hatch, just as more bullets chewed up the concrete near his position. He counted 8 mercenaries in the garage now, all focused on him. Excellent odds. If by excellent you meant suicidal. Time to even the playing field. Daniel spotted what he needed, a fire extinguisher mounted on a nearby pillar. He sprinted for it, bullets tracking his movement, and yanked it free. The mercenaries were closing in, forming a perimeter to trap him. He pulled the pin on the extinguisher and triggered it, spraying chemical foam in a wide arc. White clouds erupted, filling the garage and obscuring sight lines. The mercenaries shouted warnings to each other, trying to maintain formation in the sudden whiteout. Daniel used the chaos to move, staying low and using the foam for cover. He came up behind one of the mercenaries and struck with the fire extinguisher, a short, brutal blow that dropped the man instantly. Then Daniel took his weapon, a compact submachine gun, and quickly cleared the chamber, confirming ammunition. Now he was armed. Now the odds were slightly less suicidal. "Man down!" someone shouted through the fog. "Target is armed and dangerous. Request backup." But backup would take time, and time was exactly what Daniel needed to give Evelyn and Sarah. He moved through the chemical fog like a ghost, striking fast and disappearing before return fire could find him. Another mercenary went down, then another. Military training and years of combat experience made the difference between professionals with gear and a soldier who'd learned to fight in places where mistakes meant death. By the time the foam began to clear, 5 mercenaries were down, and the remaining 3 had retreated to regroup near their vehicles. Daniel had taken positions behind a concrete support pillar, breathing hard but controlled, checking the weapon he'd acquired. His phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. "We're in. Moving to conference center, 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Daniel just had to hold this position for 10 more minutes while 2 scientists tried to restart a federal hearing and broadcast evidence that would destroy careers and potentially bring down a pharmaceutical conspiracy. No pressure. One of the mercenaries' radios crackled. "All units, priority target spotted in conference center area. Converge on that position." They'd seen Evelyn and Sarah. The distraction was over. Now it was a race. Daniel made his decision in an instant. He couldn't hold the parking garage and protect the conference center simultaneously, but he could make it costly for them to leave, force them to move slowly and carefully by precious seconds that might make the difference. He opened fire, controlled bursts that forced the mercenaries to take cover. They returned fire, but Daniel was already moving, using the concrete pillars and abandoned vehicles for protection. He wasn't trying to kill them, just slow them down, make them think twice about rushing forward. But then reinforcements arrived. 6 more mercenaries poured into the parking garage from the main entrance, and Daniel knew his time was up. He was good, but he wasn't good enough to hold off 15 armed professionals by himself. He needed to get to the conference center before they did. Needed to be the wall between the mercenaries and the 2 women trying to save thousands of children. Daniel sprinted for the maintenance hatch, firing behind him to discourage pursuit. He reached it, dropped through, and pulled it shut above him, engaging the locking mechanism. It wouldn't hold them long, they'd breach it in minutes. But minutes were all he needed. He ran through the tunnel faster than before, not caring about noise or concealment, just speed. His lungs burned, his legs screamed protest, but he pushed harder. The tunnel seemed to stretch forever, each step an eternity, while his mind calculated how long it would take the mercenaries to reach the conference center by the surface route. Finally, he reached the ladder leading up to the conference center sublevel. He climbed it in seconds and emerged into a corridor that showed signs of the earlier explosion. Cracks in the walls, ceiling tiles hanging loose, emergency lighting flickering uncertainly. Distant shouts echoed through the building. The mercenaries were inside. Daniel moved toward the technical room, following the signs and his memory of the building's layout. He rounded a corner and found Evelyn and Sarah working frantically at a bank of computer servers, cables strewn across the floor, multiple monitors showing boot sequences and error messages. "Status?" Daniel demanded, taking up a position by the door where he could see down the corridor. 2 minutes, Sarah said, her fingers flying across a keyboard. "The servers took damage from the explosion, but the core systems are intact. We're rerouting through backup connections to get a stable internet feed." "They're in the building, multiple teams moving fast. Then hold them off for 2 more minutes." Evelyn's voice carried the steel that had built a pharmaceutical empire. "Because in 2 minutes, this is going worldwide." Daniel checked the ammunition in his weapon. 15 rounds left. 15 rounds against an unknown number of mercenaries who would converge on this room the moment they figured out where their targets had gone. The math was simple and brutal, but math didn't matter when your son's life hung in the balance. 2 minutes, Daniel repeated, chambering around. "I'll buy you 2 hours if that's what it takes." Because some fights weren't about winning. They were about holding the line long enough for others to finish the mission. And Daniel Reyes had been holding impossible lines since Afghanistan. This was just one more. The footsteps in the corridor grew louder. The first mercenary rounded the corner with professional caution, weapon raised, scanning for targets. Daniel fired once, the shot catching the man in the shoulder and spinning him backward into his teammates. Not a kill shot. Daniel had taken an oath once to preserve life, and even now, even in this moment, some part of him clung to that principle. But the message was clear. This corridor was bought and paid for in blood, and the price of advancing would be steep. "Contact, technical room, sub-level 3. The mercenary's radio crackled with the warning as he scrambled back around the corner, clutching his wounded shoulder. Behind Daniel, the sound of typing intensified. Sarah muttering commands to herself, Evelyn's voice steady as she read off IP addresses and connection protocols. They were close. So close. 90 seconds, Sarah announced. The stream is routing through 6 proxy servers. Once we go live, they can't shut us down without taking down half the internet backbone. "Well, then make it 80 seconds, Daniel said, firing 3 more rounds down the corridor as another mercenary attempted to advance. The shots forced him back, but Daniel knew they were just probing his position, testing his response time and accuracy. They'd be flanking soon, trying to find another entrance to the technical room. "There!" Evelyn's voice carried triumph and terror in equal measure. "We're live. Streaming to every major news outlet, social media platform, and the FDA's emergency broadcast system. 15,000 viewers already, and climbing." "Then start talking," Daniel said, ejecting his nearly empty magazine and checking his pockets. No spare ammunition. Of course not. He was a janitor, not a soldier. Soldiers carried spare magazines. Janitors carried mops. The absurdity of it almost made him laugh. Evelyn moved in front of the camera they'd jury-rigged from one of the monitors. Her appearance disheveled, but her voice finding that clear, authoritative tone that had convinced investors to bet millions on her vision. "My name is Dr. Evelyn Carter, CEO of Biogenesis Technologies. What you're seeing is being broadcast live from a company under attack. In the last 2 hours, armed mercenaries have bombed a federal FDA hearing, killed or injured dozens of people, and are currently attempting to murder myself and my lead researcher to prevent the approval of a life-saving pediatric drug." Sarah held up Marcus Webb's portfolio to the camera, its leather exterior now scuffed from their desperate flight. "This portfolio contains 18 months of correspondence between our legal counsel, Marcus Webb, and Victor Kane, CEO of Nexus Pharmaceuticals. It details a conspiracy to sabotage our research, steal our clinical data, and eliminate key personnel. It's corporate murder for profit, and it's happening right now." The viewer count on the monitor climbed rapidly. 20,000. 30,000. The numbers accelerated as algorithms detected trending content and pushed it to more feeds. Daniel fired again as a mercenary tried to rush the corridor, using suppressing fire to keep them honest. "They're going to breach this position soon. Whatever you need to say it fast." Evelyn's hands shook as she held up pages from the portfolio, displaying them to the camera. "These are wire transfer records, $20 million paid to offshore accounts. These are lists of Biogenesis employees marked for elimination. These are detailed plans for today's attack, including the exact timing of the explosion and the number of mercenaries hired, all coordinated by our own legal counsel in partnership with a competitor who stands to lose billions if our drug succeeds. The sound of boots on metal echoed from somewhere above them. They'd found another access point, probably through the ventilation system. Daniel moved to cover that angle, his weapon tracking the ceiling panels. Compound K-17 isn't just another pharmaceutical product, Evelyn continued, her voice strengthening with each word. It's hope for 15,000 children who currently have no effective treatment options, children who will die without this cure. And men like Victor Kane and Marcus Webb would rather see those children buried than lose their market share. A ceiling panel exploded inward, and a mercenary dropped through the opening. Daniel's shot caught him mid-fall, the man crashing to the floor in a tangle of limbs and tactical gear. Daniel grabbed the fallen mercenary's weapon, a proper rifle this time, with a full magazine, and tossed his empty submachine gun aside. 60,000 viewers, Sarah reported, her voice shaking. It's going viral. CNN just picked up the feed. So did the FBI. Then we've won, Evelyn said, though her eyes said she knew better. They'd exposed the conspiracy, but that didn't mean they'd survive it. Whatever happens next, the truth is out. K-17 will be approved. Those children will get their cure. Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He risked a glance at the screen and felt his heart stop. A text from Mrs. Chen. Daniel, where are you? Men in suits came asking about you and Noah. I told them nothing but they're watching the building. I'm scared. They'd found his apartment. Found Noah. The world narrowed to a single point of crystalline terror. Everything else, the mercenaries, the conspiracy, even his own survival, became secondary to the one thought screaming through his mind. They had found his son. I have to go. Daniel's voice sounded distant in his own ears, disconnected from the panic clawing at his chest. They've found my son. They're at my apartment. Evelyn turned from the camera, her face stricken. Daniel, you can't leave. We need you here. They'll kill us the moment you're gone. And they'll kill my son if I don't go. Daniel moved toward the door, every instinct warring between duty and fatherhood. You have 70,000 people watching. The FBI is on its way. You've already won. You just need to survive long enough for help to arrive. How long? Sarah asked quietly. Daniel checked his phone again. Multiple news alerts, emergency broadcasts, FBI statements. The cavalry was coming, but bureaucracy moves slowly, even in crisis. 20 minutes. Maybe 30. Can you barricade this room? Buy yourself time. We can try, Evelyn said, though doubt shadowed her words. But Daniel, my son is 7 years old. He has seizures. He's scared and sick and the only family I have left in this world. Daniel's voice cracked, the careful control shattering. I failed to protect his mother. I won't fail him too. Understanding flickered across Evelyn's face, followed by resignation. She nodded once, that decisive gesture. Then go. Save your son. We'll hold here as long as we can. Barricade the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone except law enforcement with proper identification. Daniel handed Sarah the rifle. Do you know how to use this? Point and shoot, right? Good enough. Aim for center mass, controlled bursts, don't waste ammunition. He turned back to Evelyn. Everything you need is already streaming. The evidence is out there. Nothing Webb or Kane does now can bury it. You've already saved those 15,000 children. Now save yourselves. Daniel moved to the door, pausing for one last look at the two women who'd trusted a janitor with their lives. Thank you. For the cure. For my son's future. For everything. Then he was gone, sprinting down the corridor as gunfire erupted behind him. The mercenaries were making their final push on the technical room, and Daniel had to trust that Evelyn and Sarah were smart enough, strong enough, to hold out until help arrived, because he had his own child to save. The route out of the conference center was a nightmare of burning debris, collapsed ceiling sections, and the acrid smell of explosives. Daniel navigated it with single-minded focus, his soldiers' training taking over. The fastest route, the safest path, the quickest way to Noah. He emerged from the building into chaos. The campus was swarming with emergency responders now, real ones, in official vehicles with proper identification. Police had established a perimeter, SWAT teams were mobilizing, and somewhere in that organized mayhem, FBI agents were probably coordinating a response to the viral live stream that had just exposed a corporate conspiracy to millions of viewers. But none of that mattered. Daniel had minutes, maybe less, before whoever Webb had sent to his apartment made their move. He sprinted to the parking garage where his old Honda sat in its assigned spot, the vehicle he'd bought specifically because it was anonymous and reliable. He gunned the engine and tore out of the garage, leaving rubber on concrete as he accelerated toward the exit. The drive to his apartment building usually took 23 minutes. Daniel made it in 11, running red lights and pushing the Honda's ancient engine to its limits. Every second felt like an eternity, every traffic light an enemy, every cautious driver an obstacle between him and Noah. His phone rang. Mrs. Chen. "Daniel, they're knocking on your door. 3 men. They say they're federal agents, but they don't look right. I've got Noah in my apartment and locked the doors, but don't open the door for anyone. I'm 2 minutes away. Keep Noah calm and quiet. Hurry, please hurry." Daniel ended the call and pressed the accelerator harder. The apartment building came into view, a modest 3-story structure in a neighborhood that minded its own business. 2 black sedans were parked illegally on the street in front, and Daniel spotted 3 men on the 3rd-floor walkway outside his apartment door. One was working on the lock with professional tools while the other 2 stood watch. Not federal agents. Webb's cleanup crew. Daniel parked half a block away and approached on foot, using parked cars for cover. His rifle was gone, left with Sarah, and his only remaining weapon was surprise and desperation. Against 3 professionals, that wasn't much of an advantage, but desperation made fathers into something more than human. He reached the building's side entrance and took the stairs 3 at a time, moving with quiet speed. The men outside his apartment were focused on the lock, confident in their numbers and training. They weren't expecting resistance from a janitor who'd supposedly been trapped in a corporate shootout across town. Daniel hit the 3rd-floor landing and assessed the situation in a heartbeat. 2 men flanking his door, one working the lock, tactical gear, under civilian jackets. Sidearms visible. Professional stance. These weren't random thugs, these were operators, probably ex-military like the teams that had attacked Biogenesis. No time for subtlety, no time for planning. Daniel charged. The element of surprise bought him 3 precious seconds. He crashed into the nearest man like a linebacker, driving him backward into the railing with enough force to crack ribs. The man's gun clattered to the walkway. Daniel scooped it up and fired twice at the second guard, catching him in the leg and chest. The lockpick spun around, reaching for his weapon, but Daniel was faster. He closed the distance and struck with the pistol. A short, brutal blow that shattered the man's jaw and sent him crashing into Daniel's apartment door. 3 men down in 5 seconds. But the gunshots had announced his presence to the entire neighborhood, and Daniel could hear more footsteps pounding up the stairs behind him. "Mrs. Chen!" Daniel hammered on her door. "It's Daniel! Open up!" The door cracked open, revealing Mrs. Chen's terrified face. Behind her, Daniel could see Noah huddled on the couch, his small face pale and frightened. The sight of his son safe, alive, sent a wave of relief so powerful that Daniel's legs nearly buckled. Inside. Now. Daniel pushed into the apartment and locked the door behind him. "Get away from the windows." "Dad!" Noah scrambled off the couch and crashed into Daniel's legs, small arms wrapping around him with desperate strength. "I was so scared. Mrs. Chen said bad men were coming, and we had to hide, and I thought, shh, buddy, I'm here. You're safe." Daniel knelt and pulled Noah into a fierce embrace, breathing in the scent of his son's shampoo and feeling the rapid hammer of his small heart. "I'm here, and I won't let anyone hurt you, I promise." The apartment door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it. More of Webb's people, trying to breach the entry. Mrs. Chen whimpered, backing toward her bedroom. "Is there a back way out?" Daniel asked her. "Fire escape outside the bedroom window, but it's a long drop to the alley." "Better than staying here." Daniel scooped Noah into his arms, the boy's weight familiar and precious. "Come on." They moved to Mrs. Chen's bedroom, where a window looked out onto the building's fire escape. Daniel could hear the apartment door splintering under repeated impacts, maybe 30 seconds before they broke through. He forced the window open and helped Mrs. Chen through first, then passed Noah to her waiting arms. The fire escape was old metal, rusted and creaking, but it held. Daniel climbed through just as the apartment door crashed open behind them. "Go, down the stairs!" Daniel shielded Noah with his body as they descended the metal stairs as fast as they dared. Behind them, men were shouting, coordinating. A window shattered as someone tried to follow them onto the fire escape. They reached the alley, where Daniel's Honda waited like salvation. He got Mrs. Chen and Noah into the back seat, then slid behind the wheel. The engine caught on the first try. Thank God for reliable Japanese engineering, and Daniel accelerated down the alley just as the first pursuer reached the ground level behind them. A bullet starred the rear window but didn't penetrate. Daniel took a sharp corner, then another, weaving through residential streets while constantly checking the rearview mirror. One of the black sedans had picked up their trail, following at a distance that suggested professional surveillance rather than immediate pursuit. They were being tracked, probably had GPS locators on the vehicle or were following by satellite. Webb's people weren't going to give up, not when witnesses could destroy everything they'd worked for. Daniel's mind raced through options. He couldn't outrun them indefinitely. Couldn't go to the police yet, not until he verified that the FBI had secured the evidence from biogenesis and issued arrest warrants. If he walked into a precinct now and Webb's people had corrupted local law enforcement, they'd all die in a holding cell before anyone asked questions. He needed sanctuary, somewhere public enough that Webb's people couldn't make a move, but secure enough to protect Noah until this was over. The hospital. It was a 15-minute drive to County General, the same hospital where Noah had received most of his treatment. Public space, security cameras, witnesses everywhere. And more importantly, Daniel knew the layout from countless visits, knew the staff, knew where to hide if things went wrong. He took a deliberately indirect route, checking constantly for tails. The black sedan stayed with them, always 3 or 4 cars back, professional and patient. They were waiting for an opportunity, a moment when Daniel was vulnerable. County General's emergency entrance loomed ahead, bright and busy with ambulances and incoming patients. Daniel pulled up to the drop-off zone, right in front of the cameras and security guards, and helped Noah and Mrs. Chen out of the car. Inside, emergency waiting room. Stay visible, stay public. Daniel pressed the pistol he'd taken from the mercenary into Mrs. Chen's hands, along with most of the cash from his wallet. If anyone approaches you who isn't hospital staff or police, you use this. Understood? Daniel, what about you? Mrs. Chen's weathered face showed the same fierce protectiveness she'd always shown Noah. I'm going to end this, one way or another. He knelt in front of Noah, gripping the boy's small shoulders. Buddy, I need you to be brave a little longer. Stay with Mrs. Chen. Don't leave the hospital. If I'm not back in an hour, you tell the doctors everything. Tell them about compound K17, about biogenesis, about why we're here. Can you do that? Noah's eyes were wide with fear, but he nodded. You're coming back, right? You have to come back. I'm coming back. Always. Daniel pulled his son into one last embrace, memorizing the feel of him, the weight and warmth that made everything else worthwhile. I love you, Noah. More than anything in this world. I love you too, Dad. Daniel watched them disappear into the hospital's bright safety, then climb back into his Honda. The black sedan was parked across the street, its occupants watching and waiting. Good. Let them follow. Let them think he was running scared. Because Daniel wasn't running anymore. He drove away from the hospital, taking a route toward the industrial district where old warehouses and abandoned lots offered privacy for the kind of confrontation that was coming. The black sedan followed, abandoning subtlety now. They thought they had him cornered, a desperate father running out of options, isolated from his son, unarmed and outmatched. They had no idea who they were really chasing. Dr. Daniel Reyes had died in Afghanistan. But the soldier who'd survived that death, the surgeon who'd learned to kill to protect his patients, the special forces attachment who'd operated behind enemy lines, the man who'd lost everything and built himself back from grief and ashes, that man was still very much alive, and he was done hiding. Daniel pulled into the parking lot of an abandoned textile factory, its windows broken and walls covered in graffiti. The black sedan followed, parking 20 feet away. 3 men emerged, moving with the confidence of professionals who'd done this kind of work before. Extraction, elimination, cleanup. Standard mercenary operations. Daniel got out of his car slowly, hands visible, projecting defeat and exhaustion. Let them think this would be easy. The lead mercenary was tall, probably ex-military from his bearing. He spoke with a neutral accent that suggested expensive international training. Mr. Reyes, or should I say Dr. Reyes, we've learned a lot about you in the last few hours. Impressive service record. Shame about that death certificate, though. Makes things complicated. Whatever Webb is paying you, it's not enough, Daniel said. The evidence is already public. FBI has it, news media has it, millions of people have seen the live stream. You can kill me, but it won't change anything. We're not here to kill you, Doctor. The mercenary smiled without warmth. We're here to offer you a choice. Your son's medical records show he needs treatment. Expensive treatment. Compound K-17 might get approved, sure, but FDA approval to actual production? That's 12 to 18 months minimum. Your son doesn't have that kind of time. Ice crystallized in Daniel's chest. What are you offering? Mr. Kane at Nexus Pharmaceuticals has access to experimental treatments. Similar mechanism to K-17, not quite as elegant, but available now. You walk away from this mess, stop helping biogenesis, and your son gets the treatment he needs. You keep fighting, and he becomes another sad statistic in a medical journal. They were trying to buy him, threatening Noah to force Daniel's cooperation in burying the evidence. It was elegant in its cruelty. Use a father's love as leverage, turn his greatest strength into his vulnerability. And if I refuse, Daniel asked, though he already knew the answer. Then your son has an unfortunate accident. Seizures are unpredictable things, after all. Tragic when they happen in public places. So many ways a sick child can get hurt. The rage that flooded through Daniel was cold and precise, not the hot anger of impulse, but the calculated fury of someone deciding exactly how to kill. These men had just threatened his son, had turned Noah's illness into a weapon, had proven they would hurt a 7-year-old child to protect corporate profits. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. I need a minute to think, Daniel said, his voice deliberately shaking. Take your time. But make the right choice, Doctor, for your son's sake. Daniel turned away, as if struggling with the decision. His eyes scanned the abandoned lot, cataloging terrain and opportunities. Broken concrete, rusted metal, a drainage ditch, piles of construction debris. Not much, but enough for someone who'd learned to improvise in far worse conditions. He bent down, as if overcome with emotion, and his hand found a length of rebar hidden in the weeds. The weight was familiar, not quite a rifle, not quite a knife, but a weapon nonetheless. Daniel stood and turned in one smooth motion. The rebar whistled through the air, catching the lead mercenary across the temple before he could react. The man dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The other two went for their weapons, but Daniel was already moving. He closed the distance to the second mercenary, using the rebar to deflect the man's pistol arm while driving his knee into the man's solar plexus. Air exploded from the mercenary's lungs. Daniel struck again, disarming him and sending him stumbling backward. The third mercenary got his weapon up and fired. Daniel felt the bullet crease his left shoulder, a burning line of pain that sent adrenaline flooding his system. He ignored it, pushing through the way he'd learned in Afghanistan when staying still meant death. He tackled the shooter, and they went down together in a tangle of limbs. The fight was brutal and desperate. No technique or elegance, just two trained killers trying to end each other. Daniel took an elbow to the jaw that made stars explode across his vision. He responded with a headbutt that shattered the mercenary's nose. They rolled across broken concrete, each trying to gain advantage. Daniel's fingers found a chunk of broken cinder block. He brought it down once, twice, until the mercenary stopped moving. Silence fell over the parking lot, broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing. 3 men lay unconscious or worse around him, testament to violence he'd hoped never to embrace again. His shoulder throbbed where the bullet had grazed him, blood soaking his shirt, but the wound was superficial. He'd survived. Noah was safe, and the men who'd threatened his son would never threaten anyone again. Daniel's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered it warily. Dr. Reyes? The voice was female, professional, carrying authority. This is Special Agent Jennifer Martinez with the FBI. We've secured biogenesis technologies and have Marcus Webb and Victor Kane in custody. Dr. Carter and Dr. Vance are safe. Are you in need of assistance? Relief crashed over Daniel like a wave. I'm okay. My son is at County General Hospital with a neighbor. Please send someone to protect them. Webb sent people after them. Already done. We have agents en route. Dr. Carter told us about your situation. A pause. She also told us about your real identity. There are a lot of people who want to ask you questions, Dr. Reyes, starting with how a dead Army surgeon ended up working as a janitor at the one company developing a cure for his son's illness. Long story. I imagine so. Where are you now? Daniel looked at the three unconscious mercenaries, at the blood on his hands, at the abandoned factory that had nearly become his grave. Cleaning up one last mess. I'll turn myself in, cooperate fully, answer every question, but first I need to see my son. I need to know he's really safe. Understood. County General, emergency waiting room. We'll have agents meet you there. Daniel ended the call and walked back to his Honda, every muscle screaming protest. His shoulder needed stitches, his ribs felt bruised if not broken, and exhaustion was beginning to claw at the edges of his consciousness. But Noah was safe. Evelyn and Sarah were alive. The conspiracy was exposed. Compound K-17 would be approved. Mission accomplished. The drive back to County General passed in a blur. Daniel was running on fumes now, adrenaline giving way to the crash that always followed combat. He parked illegally and stumbled toward the emergency entrance, where FBI agents and windbreakers were establishing a perimeter. One of them approached, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Dr. Reyes? That's me. Agent Martinez, your son and Mrs. Chen are in examination room 4. They're fine, just shaken up. Before you see them, I need to inform you that you're not under arrest, but we do need a full statement. What you did today, helping expose that conspiracy, that carries significant weight. But the fact remains, you've been living under a false identity for 5 years. I know, I'm ready to face whatever consequences come. Daniel met her eyes. But can I see my son first, please? I just need 5 minutes to know he's really okay. Agent Martinez's expression softened fractionally. 5 minutes. Then we talk. And Dr. Reyes? For what it's worth, what you did took guts. Not many people would risk everything for the right reasons. She led him through the emergency department to a private examination room. Through the window, Daniel could see Noah sitting on the bed, Mrs. Chen beside him, both of them looking small and frightened but alive and whole. Daniel pushed open the door, and Noah's head snapped up. For a heartbeat, father and son just stared at each other, both processing that the nightmare was really over. Then Noah launched himself off the bed and into Daniel's arms, nearly knocking him over with the force of his embrace. Daniel caught him, ignoring the screaming pain in his shoulder, and held on like Noah was the only real thing in a world gone mad. You came back, Noah sobbed into Daniel's chest. You promised you'd come back, and you did. Always, buddy, always. Daniel buried his face in his son's hair, tears streaming down his face. I will always come back for you, no matter what. That's a promise I'll never break. Mrs. Chen was crying too, relief and joy and exhaustion all mixed together. Is it over? Are we safe? It's over, Daniel confirmed. The bad people are in jail. The FBI is handling everything. We're safe. He held Noah for those precious 5 minutes, memorizing the feeling, storing it against whatever came next. Because the FBI would have questions. The military would have questions. His false identity meant consequences, possibly serious ones. The life he'd carefully constructed over 5 years was about to collapse, but Noah would have his cure. Compound K-17 would be approved. 15,000 children would get to grow up, because today a dead soldier and a brilliant CEO had refused to let corporate greed murder hope. Some prices were worth paying. Agent Martinez appeared in the doorway, her expression sympathetic but firm. Dr. Reyes, it's time. Daniel kissed the top of Noah's head one last time. I have to go talk to some people, buddy. Mrs. Chen will stay with you. I'll be back as soon as I can. Promise? Promise. Daniel stood, every movement and effort now that the adrenaline had fully drained away. He followed Agent Martinez out of the examination room, down a corridor, and into a small conference room where 2 other FBI agents waited with recording equipment and thick folders of documents. Let's start at the beginning, Agent Martinez said, settling into a chair across from him. Afghanistan 5 years ago. The bomb that supposedly killed Dr. Daniel Reyes and his wife Maria. Except you survived. Walk me through what really happened. And Daniel did. He told them everything, the research that had attracted the wrong attention, the conspiracy he'd uncovered, the bomb that killed Maria, the CIA handler who'd helped him disappear. He explained how he'd learned that someone at Biogenesis was using his research, how he'd gotten the janitor job to stay close to the project, how Noah's diagnosis had turned survival into desperation. He described last night's attack in the parking garage, the sabotage evidence, the explosion at the FDA hearing, the escape through the maintenance tunnels, the evidence they'd found in Marcus Webb's car, the live stream that had exposed everything to the world. The confession took hours. The FBI agents recorded every word, occasionally interrupting with questions or requests for clarification. Daniel answered honestly, holding nothing back. He'd spent 5 years hiding, and he was done with lies. Finally, as evening shadows lengthened outside the conference room window, Agent Martinez closed her notebook. That's quite a story, Dr. Reyes. We'll need to verify details, cross-reference with military records, coordinate with the CIA. But preliminary evidence supports your account. Marcus Webb and Victor Kane are both giving statements now trying to cut deals. What you did today, exposing their conspiracy, protecting those scientists, saving your son, that matters. What happens to me now? Daniel asked quietly. Complicated question. Technically, you've committed identity fraud and violated your declared death status. But you also helped expose a corporate conspiracy that was attempting to block a life-saving drug while committing murder to protect profits. The military will want you back under your real identity. The CIA will want to debrief you. And Biogenesis. She smiled slightly. Dr. Carter has already been calling, demanding updates on your status. She's quite insistent that you receive full credit for today's events. I don't want credit. I just want my son to get his treatment. About that. Agent Martinez pulled out a different folder. I spoke with Dr. Vance an hour ago. Compound K-17 is being fast-tracked for emergency approval. The FDA Review Board is reconvening tomorrow morning, and given today's events and the public attention, approval is essentially guaranteed. Production will begin within 3 months. Your son will be among the first to receive treatment. The words didn't feel real. After years of fighting, hiding, surviving, it was actually going to happen. Noah would get the cure. He'd live. He'd have the chance at a normal life that every parent dreamed of for their child. Thank you, Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. Thank you. Thank the scientists who did the work. Thank yourself for protecting them. Agent Martinez stood. You can return to your son now. We'll have more questions tomorrow, and you'll need to coordinate with military liaison about your status. But tonight, be with your family. You've earned that much. Daniel found Noah and Mrs. Chen in a private room, the boy having finally fallen asleep from exhaustion. Mrs. Chen dozed in a chair beside the bed, one hand resting protectively near Noah's. Daniel settled into the other chair, his body screaming protest at every movement, and watched his son sleep. In the morning, there would be questions and consequences and decisions to make about who Dr. Daniel Reyes would become now that he was no longer dead. But tonight, Noah was safe. The cure was coming, and a father who'd fought an impossible war could finally stop running. Outside the window, the city lights blazed like stars brought down to earth, and somewhere in those lights, thousands of families slept peacefully, never knowing how close they'd come to losing hope. Because some heroes wore uniforms and carried medals, and some wore gray janitor's uniforms and carried mops, and both kinds changed the world, one quiet act of courage at a time. Morning came with the kind of gentle light that made yesterday's violence feel like a fever dream. Daniel woke stiff and sore in the hospital chair, his shoulder bandaged where a doctor had stitched the bullet graze while he'd dozed. Noah still slept peacefully, his small chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm that parents of sick children learn to treasure. Each breath was a gift, a promise that today wasn't the day the seizures won. Mrs. Chen had left sometime during the night, replaced by a young FBI agent who sat quietly by the door, her presence a reminder that Daniel's story wasn't finished yet, just paused between chapters. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Martinez. Conference room C, 9th floor, 9 a.m. Bring coffee. It's going to be a long day. He checked the time, 7:30. 90 minutes to shower in the hospital facilities, change into the clean clothes Mrs. Chen had thoughtfully packed in a duffel bag and prepared himself for whatever bureaucratic maze awaited. But first, he needed to be here when Noah woke up. Needed his son to open his eyes and see that his father hadn't disappeared again. 20 minutes later, Noah stirred, his eyes blinking open with the confusion of sleep in an unfamiliar place. Then he saw Daniel, and the confusion melted into relief so profound it hurt to witness. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said softly, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. My head hurts a little." Noah's small hand found Daniel's, gripping it like an anchor. "Is it really over? Are the bad people really gone?" "They're really gone. The police have them, and they're not getting out. You're safe. We're both safe." Daniel smoothed Noah's sleep-mussed hair. "And I have good news. Really good news." Noah's eyes widened with cautious hope. "What kind of good news?" "The medicine I've been telling you about, the one that can help kids like you, it's going to be approved. Dr. Carter, the lady I work for, she's making sure it happens fast. You're going to be one of the first children to get it." For a long moment, Noah just stared at him, processing words that must have seemed too big to be real. Then tears welled up in his eyes, and his small voice cracked when he spoke. "I'm going to get better? Like, really better? Not just take medicine every day better, but actually better?" "Actually better. The kind of better where you can run and play and not worry about seizures, where you can go to sleepovers at friends' houses and play sports, and do all the things other kids do." Daniel's own voice thickened with emotion. "You're going to have a normal life, Noah. The life you deserve." Noah launched himself into Daniel's arms, sobbing with relief and joy and the overwhelming weight of hope that had lived too long as a distant dream. Daniel held him through it, his own tears falling into his son's hair, both of them releasing years of fear and uncertainty in that hospital room, while the morning sun painted everything gold. When Noah finally pulled back, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand, he asked the question that had been haunting him. "What about you, Dad? Are you in trouble? I heard the FBI lady say something about questions and your identity, and some people need to ask me things, yeah, but nothing bad is going to happen, I promise." Daniel chose his words carefully, not wanting to lie, but also not wanting to burden his 7-year-old with complexities of military law and falsified death certificates. "I did some things that were technically against the rules, but I did them for the right reasons. To keep us safe, to make sure you got the medicine you needed. The people in charge understand that. Will you have to go away?" The question stabbed straight through Daniel's heart. "Nobody. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens, we stay together. That's non-negotiable." A knock on the door interrupted them. A nurse entered, followed by someone Daniel hadn't expected to see, Dr. Evelyn Carter herself, looking exhausted but alive with Dr. Sarah Vance beside her. Both women carried the particular weariness of people who'd survived something that should have killed them. "I hope we're not intruding," Evelyn said, her eyes finding Daniel's with an intensity that suggested this wasn't a casual visit. "I wanted to check on you both, and I wanted Noah to meet the boy who's going to change everything." Noah looked confused, glancing between Daniel and the two women. "I'm just Noah." "You're not just anything," Sarah said gently, moving closer to the bed. "You're the reason your father risked everything, the reason he fought so hard to protect our research. In a way, you're the heart of this entire story." "I don't understand," Noah said quietly. Evelyn pulled a chair closer and sat down, meeting Noah at eye level with the kind of respect usually reserved for adults. "Your father is a remarkable man, Noah. He used to be a very important doctor who helped create the medicine you're going to receive. But some bad people wanted to stop his work, and they hurt your family. Your father did everything he could to protect you, even pretending to be someone else, working a job that wasn't worthy of his skills, hiding in plain sight. All of it was because he loves you more than anything else in the world." Noah looked at Daniel with new understanding, pieces clicking together in his young mind. "The janitor job? You were really a doctor?" "I was. I am." Daniel nodded. "But being your dad has always been my most important job, Noah. Everything else was just details. Your father saved my life," Evelyn continued, "twice. And in doing so, he saved thousands of other children who need the same medicine you need. So when I say you're going to change everything, I mean it, Because your father's love for you is why any of us are sitting here right now. Tears welled up in Noah's eyes again, but this time they carried a different weight, understanding, pride, and a love that had never needed words. My dad's a hero. Yes, he is, Sarah agreed. And now we get to make sure his sacrifice wasn't in vain. We're going to make you better, Noah. I promise. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, but Daniel could see Noah beginning to fade, exhaustion pulling him back towards sleep. The women seemed to sense it too, standing to leave. The FBI wants to see me at 9, Daniel told them. Any idea what to expect? Bureaucratic circus, Evelyn said bluntly. Military representatives, CIA handlers, Justice Department lawyers, everyone wants a piece of the story. But I've retained legal counsel on your behalf, the best defense attorney in the state. Whatever happens, you're not facing this alone. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. You saved my life and my company. More than that, you saved the cure. Whatever legal complications arise from your situation, Biogenesis will handle them. Consider it the least we can do. After they left, Daniel got Noah settled back to sleep, then prepared himself for the day ahead. He showered, changed, and made his way to the 9th floor conference room where Agent Martinez had directed him. The coffee he'd been told to bring sat cooling in a cardboard cup as he pushed open the door. The room was packed. FBI agents, military officers in dress uniforms, a woman who introduced herself as CIA Liaison Officer Peters, and 3 lawyers who represented interests Daniel could only guess at. At the head of the table sat a stern-looking colonel whose nameplate read Morrison, not the Biogenesis executive, but someone far more intimidating. Dr. Reyes, Colonel Morrison began without preamble. Or should I say, Major Reyes, your death certificate poses a unique problem. Legally, you've been dead for 5 years. Practically, you're sitting in front of me drinking terrible hospital coffee. We need to reconcile these facts. I understand, sir. Daniel straightened in his chair, falling back into military posture without conscious thought. I'm prepared to accept responsibility for my actions. Your actions, the colonel continued, include desertion, technically, identity fraud, and violation of your classified clearance obligations by disappearing without authorization. On the other hand, your actions also include uncovering a weapons development conspiracy, protecting classified research from enemy hands, and yesterday, preventing the murder of civilians and exposing corporate terrorism. You're either a criminal or a hero, and I'm having trouble deciding which. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. I'm a father who did what he had to do to protect his son. Everything else is just paperwork. Daniel met the colonel's eyes without flinching. Court-martial me, discharge me, throw me in Leavenworth. I don't care. My son is going to live because of what happened yesterday. That's the only verdict that matters to me. A long silence filled the room. Then, unexpectedly, Colonel Morrison's stern expression cracked into something almost resembling respect. You've got brass, Major. I'll give you that. He shuffled papers in front of him. Here's what's going to happen. The Army is prepared to offer you a deal. We reinstate you to active duty, backdate your records to show you were operating under classified deep cover for the past 5 years. In exchange, you consult on military medical research, help us close the loose ends from your original investigation, and accept a formal reprimand for failing to maintain proper contact with command. That's the deal? Daniel couldn't quite believe it. No court-martial, no prison time. The alternative is a lengthy legal battle that exposes classified programs and makes the military look incompetent for losing track of one of our officers for 5 years, the CIA liaison officer interjected. Nobody wants that publicity. And frankly, Dr. Reyes, you've become something of a folk hero. The single father janitor who took down a corporate conspiracy? The media is eating it up. Prosecuting you would be a public relations nightmare. What about Noah? My son needs to be my priority. I can't deploy overseas or stateside duty only, Colonel Morrison confirmed. Research position at Walter Reed Medical Center, regular hours, full benefits, and proximity to your son's treatment. We're not monsters, Major. We understand the circumstances. It was more than Daniel had dared hope for. A return to his real identity, his medical career restored, and the ability to stay close to Noah through his treatment. The Army was essentially giving him a clean slate in exchange for quietly sweeping the past 5 years under the rug. And my son's medical care? Daniel pressed. The treatment he needs? Fully covered under military family benefits, one of the lawyers confirmed. Biogenesis has also established a special program for trial participants, with Dr. Carter personally overseeing your son's case. Between military coverage and corporate support, Noah's treatment will cost you nothing. Daniel felt something break open in his chest, a knot of anxiety he'd carried for so long that its absence felt like floating. Noah would get treatment. They'd stay together. Daniel could return to being a doctor, could use his skills to help others instead of hiding them behind a janitor's uniform. Then I accept, Daniel said. Thank you. The rest of the meeting dissolved into logistics and paperwork. Daniel signed documents reinstating his military commission, acknowledging classified briefings, agreeing to terms of his probationary status. Hours passed in a blur of legal language and administrative procedure, the machinery of bureaucracy grinding through the impossible task of making a dead man alive again on paper. By the time Daniel returned to Noah's room, afternoon sun slanted through the windows and his son was awake, drawing pictures with colored pencils Mrs. Chen had brought. The FBI agent by the door had been replaced by a military MP, another small indicator that Daniel's life was shifting back towards something resembling normal. Hey, buddy, Daniel said, settling into the chair beside Noah's bed. How are you feeling? Better? The doctor came by and said my numbers look good. Noah held up his drawing, a stick figure in an army uniform standing next to a smaller stick figure. Is it true you're going to be a soldier doctor again? It is. Does that bother you? Noah considered this seriously, his young face thoughtful. Will you have to go to war? No, I'll work at a hospital here, helping other soldiers and their families. I'll come home every night. We might even get to live on base, which means you'd have a school right there with other military kids. Will they understand about my seizures and stuff? They'll understand better than anyone. Military families take care of each other, Noah. It's what we do. Daniel reached out and squeezed his son's hand. And speaking of taking care of each other, Dr. Vance wants to start your treatment next week. They're manufacturing the first batch of compound K17 right now, and you're going to be patient number 1. Noah set down his colored pencils, his expression suddenly serious. Will it hurt? A little. There will be injections and some side effects while your body adjusts, but nothing like the seizures. And every day you'll get a little better, a little stronger, until one day you'll wake up and realize you're not sick anymore. You're just Noah. Just Noah, the boy repeated, as if testing out the concept of a life not defined by illness. I like the sound of that. A knock interrupted them. Evelyn stood in the doorway again, but this time she was accompanied by a news crew, camera, reporter, the full media circus Daniel had been dreading. I'm sorry, Evelyn said, reading Daniel's expression. I know you didn't want attention, but the story's already out there, and I thought it would be better to control the narrative. This is Amanda Chen from CNN. She's been covering the biogenesis story from the beginning. She just wants to ask a few questions, show the human side of what happened. It'll help ensure K17 gets the public support it needs for fast-track production. Daniel wanted to refuse, to retreat back into anonymity, but he understood Evelyn's reasoning. Public pressure had already forced the FDA to expedite their review. Continued media attention would ensure funding, prevent corporate interference, and make it harder for anyone to bury the cure the way Webb and Kane had tried to. 5 minutes, Daniel agreed, and Noah stays off camera unless he wants to be on it. I want to help, Noah said quietly. If it helps other kids like me, I want to help. Pride swelled in Daniel's chest. 7 years old and already braver than most adults. Okay, buddy, 5 minutes. Then you rest. The interview was surprisingly gentle. Amanda Chen asked about the attack, about Daniel's background, about why he'd risked everything. Daniel kept his answers simple and honest, focusing not on his own heroism, but on the scientists who'd developed the cure, the children who needed it, and the importance of ensuring corporate greed never again stood between patients and life-saving treatment. When Amanda turned to Noah, her voice softened further. Noah, how does it feel knowing you're going to be one of the first children to receive this medicine? Noah thought about it, his small face serious. It feels like hope. Like maybe I can be a regular kid instead of a sick kid. And I'm happy other kids will get to feel that too. The simple eloquence of it brought tears to Amanda's eyes. Even the cameraman had to wipe at his face. This was the story people needed to see, not just the corporate conspiracy or the dramatic rescue, but the human cost of pharmaceutical politics. The children whose lives hung in the balance while executives calculated profit margins. After the crew left, Daniel and Noah settled into a quiet evening routine. Dinner from the hospital cafeteria, more drawings, stories read from the books Mrs. Chen had brought. Normal things, peaceful things, the kind of evening Daniel had dreamed of during all those desperate months of uncertainty. As Noah drifted toward sleep, he asked one more question. "Dad, do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Daniel's breath caught. They didn't talk about Maria often. The loss was still too raw, even 5 years later. But Noah was right to invoke her memory now, at this moment when everything was changing. "She would be so proud of you, buddy, of how brave you've been, how strong. And yeah, I think she'd be proud of me too, not for the fighting or the hiding, but for never giving up on you. That's what she would have wanted. That's what she died trying to protect." "I miss her," Noah whispered. "Noah, I miss her too, every day. But she's still with us, Noah. In you, in the way you face hard things with courage, in the way you think about other kids even when you're scared. That's all her." Daniel kissed his son's forehead. "Now sleep, big week ahead." The following days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Daniel moved through debriefings, medical examinations, and administrative processing as the Army officially brought him back from the dead. His security clearances were reinstated. His medical license was reactivated. The pieces of Dr. Daniel Rea's life were carefully reassembled by bureaucrats who specialized in making impossible situations look normal on paper. Noah began preliminary testing at Biogenesis's medical research facility, a state-of-the-art complex where Sarah Vance personally oversaw every aspect of his care. The initial scans and blood work confirmed what Daniel had feared. Noah's condition was progressing faster than expected. Without treatment, he had months, not years. But with compound K17, the prognosis was radically different. "The first injection will happen tomorrow," Sarah explained during a consultation in her office, both Daniel and Noah present. "We'll start with a low dose and monitor carefully for adverse reactions. Based on clinical trials, you should start seeing improvements within 2 weeks. Fewer seizures, better motor control, increased energy. Full remission typically occurs within 6 months of treatment." "And then I'll be cured?" Noah asked, hope and fear warring in his voice. "Then you'll be cured," Sarah confirmed gently. "This isn't a management drug, Noah. It's a cure. Once your body completes the treatment protocol, the neurological damage repairs itself. You'll still need occasional checkups, but you won't need daily medication. You won't have seizures. You'll be able to do everything other children do." Noah looked at Daniel, seeking confirmation that this miracle was real. Daniel nodded, his own throat too tight for words. The injection day arrived with spring sunshine and impossible hope. Daniel held Noah's hand as Sarah prepared the syringe, explaining each step in a calm, professional voice that reminded Daniel of his own bedside manner from years ago. Noah was scared. The needle looked intimidating, and the weight of expectation was enormous, but he faced it with the same courage he'd shown through years of illness. "Just a pinch," Sarah said, and then it was done. The first dose of compound K17 flowing into Noah's bloodstream, carrying with it the promise of a future that had seemed impossible just days ago. Noah was quiet on the drive back to their temporary housing, military family quarters, while they transitioned back to normal life. Daniel let him process in silence, understanding that sometimes hope was too big for words. That night, as Daniel tucked Noah into bed in their new apartment, his son finally spoke. "Dad, what if it doesn't work? What if I'm different from the other kids in the trials and the medicine doesn't help me?" Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "Then we'll find something else. Another treatment, another trial, another cure. Because giving up is not an option, Noah. It never has been." He smoothed Noah's hair, the gesture as familiar as breathing. "But I believe it's going to work. Dr. Vance believes it. Your body is strong. even if it doesn't always feel that way. You're going to beat this. Promise? Promise. Over the following weeks, Daniel watched for signs of improvement with the obsessive attention only a parent of a sick child could understand. Every morning he checked Noah's vitals, monitored his color, assessed his energy levels. The first week showed no dramatic changes, just the same chronic fatigue and occasional tremors that had become Noah's normal. But in the second week, something shifted. Noah woke up one morning and ate an entire breakfast without complaint. His face had more color. His movements were steadier. Small things, barely noticeable to anyone who hadn't been watching with desperate hope, but to Daniel, they were miracles. By week 3, Noah had gone 5 consecutive days without a seizure, a record that made Daniel's hands shake when he marked it on the calendar. Sarah confirmed that Noah's neurological scans were showing measurable improvement, the damaged pathways beginning to repair themselves at the cellular level. Week 4 brought Noah's first full day of school attendance in months. Daniel walked him to the base elementary school, watching his son join other military children with a mixture of joy and terror. But Noah came home that afternoon with stories of friends and games at recess, his face bright with the particular happiness of a child discovering he could be normal. The transformation continued. 6 weeks post-treatment, Noah ran a full lap around the school track without stopping. 8 weeks, and his medications were reduced by half. 10 weeks, and Sarah declared his neurological function was within normal parameters for the first time since his diagnosis. By week 12, Noah was officially in remission. The disease that had defined his short life was gone, erased by a treatment that had required conspiracy and courage and sacrifice to survive long enough to save him. Daniel cried when Sarah delivered the news, tears of relief and joy and grief for all the children who hadn't been as lucky, whose parents hadn't had access to experimental cures or the resources to fight for them. But those tears also carried determination, because now Daniel had a new mission, ensuring every child like Noah got the same chance. He threw himself into his work at Walter Reed, consulting on pediatric neurology cases, advising on clinical trials, using his experience to help other families navigate the impossible maze of rare disease treatment. His story had made him reluctant famous, parents seeking him out because they'd seen his CNN interview and thought maybe, just maybe, this doctor who'd fought so hard for his own son would fight for theirs too. And he did. Every single time. 6 months after the biogenesis attack, Daniel received an invitation to a ceremony at the company's headquarters. The building had been repaired, the damage from the explosion erased, but something fundamental had changed. Security was tighter. Protocols were stricter. And the executive team had been completely restructured, with Marcus Webb facing federal charges and Victor Kane awaiting trial for conspiracy to commit murder. Daniel arrived with Noah, both of them dressed in their best clothes. Daniel in his army dress uniform, Noah in slacks and a button-down shirt that he'd picked out himself. They were ushered into the main auditorium where hundreds of people had gathered, biogenesis employees, FDA officials, patient families, and media representatives. Evelyn stood at the podium, looking healthy and confident in a way she hadn't that terrible day in the parking garage. When she saw Daniel and Noah enter, her face lit up with genuine warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying across the auditorium, "we're here today to celebrate not just the approval of Compound K17, but the courage and sacrifice that made this moment possible. 6 months ago, this company was under attack, literally and figuratively. Corporate interests tried to destroy a cure because it threatened their profits. They were willing to kill to protect their market share." The audience murmured, many hearing these details for the first time, despite extensive media coverage. "But they failed," Evelyn continued, her voice strengthening. "They failed because of brilliant scientists who refused to abandon their research. They failed because of federal agents who pursued justice. And most importantly, they failed because of one man who risked everything to protect not just his son, but the thousands of children who needed this cure." She gestured toward Daniel. "Dr. Daniel Reyes, would you please join me on stage?" Daniel's first instinct was to refuse, to retreat from the spotlight, but Noah squeezed his hand and whispered, "Go on, Dad. She's right. You're a hero." So Daniel walked to the stage, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes tracking his movement. Evelyn met him with a warm handshake that turned into a brief embrace. "I'm going to tell them the truth," she whispered. All of it. You deserve recognition. Then she turned back to the audience and told Daniel's story, not just the heroic rescue, but everything that led to it. The research that had cost his wife her life, the years in hiding, working as a janitor to stay close to the cure, the desperate fight to protect the scientists and the evidence, the personal cost of choosing between duty and fatherhood. Patient number 1 of our compound K-17 trial is here today, Evelyn concluded. Noah Reyes, would you please join your father? Noah walked to the stage with the self-consciousness of a 7-year-old thrust into the spotlight, but when he reached Daniel and took his hand, his face showed nothing but pride. Noah is why this matters, Evelyn told the audience. Not the patents or the profits or the professional accolades. Children like Noah are why we do this work. They're why Dr. Vance spent 7 years in a laboratory. They're why I fought the FDA for expedited approval. They're why Dr. Reyes risked everything. She turned to address Noah directly. How are you feeling today, Noah? Good, Noah said, his small voice amplified by the microphone. Really good. I ran 2 miles yesterday without getting tired, and I haven't had a seizure in 4 months. The audience erupted in applause. Some people were crying. Daniel saw parents in the crowd holding their own sick children, their faces showing the desperate hope that their child might be next, might get the same miracle. Noah represents the first of thousands, Evelyn said. Compound K-17 is now in full production. Within 6 months, it will be available at major hospitals across the country. Within a year, we'll have global distribution. Every child suffering from the conditions this drug treats will have access to a cure. She held up a plaque, reading the inscription aloud. The Maria Reyes Award for Courage in Medical Research. Named in honor of Dr. Reyes's late wife, this award will be given annually to medical professionals who demonstrate extraordinary courage and sacrifice in pursuing treatments for rare diseases. Dr. Reyes, you're the first recipient. Daniel accepted the plaque with shaking hands, reading Maria's name engraved in elegant script. The award wasn't about him. It was about giving his wife's death meaning, transforming tragedy into something that would help others. It was perfect. Thank you, he managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. This isn't just my award. It belongs to every parent who sat in a hospital room watching their child suffer, wondering if hope exists. It belongs to scientists like Dr. Vance who choose hard problems over easy publications. It belongs to leaders like Dr. Carter, who refuse to let profit override purpose. He looked down at Noah. And it belongs to every brave kid who's fighting battles they didn't choose. You're all heroes. I'm just the guy who got to tell your story. The ceremony continued with presentations on the drug's development, testimonials from trial participants, and announcements about expanded research into related conditions. But Daniel barely heard it, too focused on Noah beside him, healthy and whole and alive. After the official program ended, they were mobbed by well-wishers, parents thanking Daniel for giving them hope, researchers wanting to discuss his original work, media requesting interviews. It was overwhelming and humbling and exhausting. Finally, they escaped to a quiet corner of the building, where Daniel and Noah collapsed onto a bench near the executive offices. The offices where, 6 months ago, Daniel had mopped floors and tried to be invisible. The irony wasn't lost on him. Dad, Noah said, leaning against Daniel's side, do you think we can go to the park tomorrow? Just the 2 of us? Do normal stuff? Absolutely. What kind of normal stuff? I don't know. Throw a baseball, ride bikes, just regular dad and kid things. Noah looked up at him. I feel like we've been doing big, important stuff for so long. I just want to be normal for a while. Daniel pulled his son close, kissing the top of his head. Normal sounds perfect, buddy. We've earned some normal. They sat there for a while, father and son, warrior and child, doctor and patient, all those labels and none of them. Just 2 people who'd survived something impossible and come through it together. Evelyn found them there an hour later. There you are. I have something for you. She held out an envelope. Job offer. Biogenesis is expanding our pediatric research division, and we want you to head it. Better pay than Walter Reed, full benefits, and most importantly, flexible hours so you can be there for Noah. What do you say? Daniel opened the envelope, scanning the offer letter. It was generous, almost ridiculously so. But more than the salary or the title, what caught his attention was the mission statement attached: developing treatments for rare childhood diseases with no regard for profit potential. You'd lose money on most of these conditions, Daniel pointed out. The patient populations are too small to justify the research costs. That's why we're establishing a nonprofit arm funded by K-17 profits. For every child we heal with a blockbuster drug, we'll use those profits to research 10 more rare conditions that pharmaceutical companies ignore because they're not profitable enough. Evelyn smiled. Call it the Maria Reyes Initiative. Your wife's legacy turned into action. Daniel looked at Noah, who nodded enthusiastically. Do it, Dad. Help other kids like me. Then yes, Daniel said. Thank you. For everything. Thank you, Evelyn countered. You saved my life. You saved this company. You saved thousands of children. A job offer seems like inadequate compensation. It's not about compensation, Daniel said. It's about purpose. I spent 5 years hiding, surviving, just trying to keep my son alive. Now I get to live again, really live, with meaning and purpose and the ability to help others. That's worth more than any salary. As the sun set over the Biogenesis campus, Daniel and Noah finally headed home to their apartment. It was a modest place, nothing fancy, but it was theirs, safe and permanent, and filled with the comfortable clutter of normal life. Dinosaur toys and medical textbooks, children's drawings and research papers, the beautiful chaos of a family rebuilding itself. That night, after Noah was asleep, Daniel sat on the small balcony with a cup of coffee, staring at the stars. He thought about Maria, about whether she could see them somehow, whether she knew that her death hadn't been in vain, that their son was alive and healthy, that her memory was being honored, that the work she'd died protecting was now saving thousands. He thought about the janitor's uniform hanging in his closet, kept as a reminder of who he'd been and what he'd done. The invisible man who'd saved the world with a mop and a father's desperate love. He thought about tomorrow and all the tomorrows stretching ahead, mornings at the park with Noah, research projects that would help children he'd never meet, a life lived in the light instead of the shadows. And he thought about hope, that fragile but unbreakable thing that parents of sick children learn to treasure. Hope that had sustained him through 5 years of hiding. Hope that had given him courage to fight when fighting seemed impossible. Hope that had brought them here, to this moment of peace and possibility. 6 months ago, Daniel Reyes had been a ghost haunting the corridors of Biogenesis, a dead man walking through a half-life defined by survival and fear. Now he was alive again, truly, fully alive, with a son who had a future and work that had meaning and a chance to honor the woman who'd given everything for them. Some stories ended with tragedy, some with bittersweet compromise. But this one, against all odds and probability, ended with something rare and precious, a second chance, a cure, a family made whole by love and sacrifice and the stubborn refusal to surrender hope even when darkness seemed absolute. Daniel finished his coffee and went inside, checking on Noah one last time before bed. His son slept peacefully, chest rising and falling with the easy rhythm of health, dreams untroubled by seizures or fear. Tomorrow they'd go to the park. They'd throw a baseball and ride bikes and do all those gloriously normal things that had once seemed like impossible luxuries. Because sometimes the man mopping floors isn't hiding from the world. He's protecting it, one quiet act of courage at a time. And sometimes, just sometimes, courage and love and stubborn hope are enough to change everything. The wind carried the sound of children's laughter from somewhere in the distance, a melody of life reclaimed from death, of futures restored to children who'd been given a second chance. And in a modest apartment on a military base, a father and son slept soundly, their battles won, their family safe, their story transformed from tragedy into triumph. The cure was real. The conspiracy was exposed. The children would live. And Dr. Daniel Reyes, ghost no longer, had finally come home.